Good evening, everyone. Happy Tuesday. We're about to kick off the Planning Commission meeting scheduled for 6:30. So we'll go ahead and kick off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Uh, Please lead us. So before we move on to the roll call, I want to make sure I thank all of you for joining us today. It is a public hearing, so we ask that you please follow decorum in regards to no applause, no cheering. We want to make sure we respect everybody's voice, whether you're for or against an item. Really want to make sure we respect each other. That's the way that we conduct business here, and we hope that you can honor our request. If we do notice that that is something that continues to happen or happens at all during our meeting, we'll have to give you a warning, and then we'll take the necessary steps to either pause the meeting and take the necessary action, or we'll ask legal counsel to provide guidance as we move forward. So once again, thank you very much for joining us. We love seeing folks attend our meetings and community engagement. So thank you once again, and hopefully you can honor each other's voice, and we'll move on to a roll call.
Chairperson Osaeta,
Present.
Vice Chairperson Laborin, Commissioner Prieto,
Present.
Commissioner Ruiz.
Present.
I, Kimberly Hernandez, Housing Assistant, certify that a true and correct copy of the foregoing meeting agenda was properly posted on March 13, 2025, 72 hours prior to the scheduled meeting as required by law. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54952.3, disclosure of compensation for meeting attendance by the Planning Commission is $125 per meeting. Consent calendar, Planning Commission minutes for February 4, 2025. The Planning Commission will consider approval of the minutes of the regular Planning Commission meeting of February 4th, 2025.
Can we get a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve meeting minutes. I second.
I would just suggest if you could just open it up to the public, just in case anybody wants to comment on the consent items.
Any comments, public comment on the consent items? No comments?
Commissioner Prieto,
Yes.
Commissioner Ruiz,
Yes.
Chairperson Osaeta.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item number 1, tentative tract map number 84531, consideration of a vesting tentative tract map to allow the subdivision of one parcel into a 54-unit residential condominium development located at 10130 Adela Avenue within the Industrial Flex Zone in the Tweedy Boulevard specific plan.
Can you get the presentation? Okay, go ahead. Senior planner will be making the presentation, Mr. Rodrigo Pelayo.
Good evening, Honorable Chair and Planning Commissioners. So this item before you is for a vesting tentative tract map number 84531, associated with property located at 10130 Adela Avenue. The applicant for this project or request is Nick Patterson and City Ventures on behalf of Southgate 1 INV LLC. And once again, this is a request for approval of a vesting tentative tract map that's associated for a subdivision of one parcel into 54 condominium units for a proposed or associated with the condominium unit development. Here we have an area of the subject site, which is located at the intersection of Legacy Lane and Adela Avenue. The subject site measures approximately 2.02 acres. It's located within the Tweedy Boulevard specific plan. more specifically the industrial flex zone. This is another perspective of an aerial showing the site and its surrounding context. It's predominantly surrounded by a school to the north, residential properties to the south, and a industrial related use adjacent to the east. This image before you is a parcel map of the property. Property is roughly 172 feet in width and about 513 feet in length, generally rectangular in shape. These are some images of the existing site conditions. The image above shows a perspective standing from Adela Avenue looking east toward the site. And the image below is a perspective from the intersection of Legacy Lane and Adela Avenue looking southeast toward the site. These are additional images. Image on the top would be a view from Legacy Lane looking southwest from the street toward the site. And then there's two views or two images at the bottom there, which show views looking to the properties across the street, Legacy Lane, which is the school campus. And then it's more specifically the softball and baseball fields within that school campus. So this request for vesting tentative tract map is for the purposes to subdivide the parcel into 54 condominium units. The associated development project would consist of 3-story attached townhomes for sale, all within a total of 6 buildings. Each of the buildings would have 9 dwelling units, and 6 of those total units would be offered for moderate income level, or in other words, affordable levels per the state's density bonus law. It's important to note that right now, the project before you, it's specifically the consideration of the tract map. The project itself for the proposed development was already reviewed by staff, and it will be processed at staff level given the city's zoning code procedures. This project is subject to administrative plan review and design review, which that's what staff would be conducting. And the tentative tract map is subject to the Planning Commission's review for approval. So your action would consist specifically on the tract map itself, not the design of the proposed development. This image before you shows the proposed vesting tentative tract map. More specifically, it shows some proposed easements within the subject site to accommodate the proposed subdivision of the property to accommodate the condominium configuration. And here we have a preliminary site plan, which shows the configuration of the buildings within the site. Apologize for the image not being as clear as possible there. It's just due to the size of the scale there. But as mentioned, it's a 6 buildings within the project site. Each of those buildings would have 9 units. Once again, this tentative tract map is subject to the review of by the Planning Commission according to the Southgate Municipal Code section 12.10.060. Following the approval of the tract map, a final map is required to be presented to the City Council for final review and consideration. An environmental analysis was prepared for this project. Based on the analysis, it was determined that the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act under section or class 32, which is infill development projects. With that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission find that the project is categorically exempt, subject to CEQA, class 32 exemption, and adopt a resolution to approve this tentative tract map number 84531, subject to proposed conditions of approval or any other conditions that the Planning Commission may wish to impose. This concludes my presentation. The applicant is here tonight, and they do have a presentation that they would also like to make.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo.
And
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, just to add in a quick clarification with the applicant before the hearing commenced, the applicant is requesting our consideration of an adjustment, modification to condition 37, such that the last sentence of that condition, which currently is drafted as no permit will be issued prior to recordation, to change to no permit will be issued prior to final submittal and subject to the limitations of the Subdivision Map Act. Staff has no objection to that modification of language, and during his presentation, you can get that concurrence from the applicant should you care to. Thank you. Yes, condition 37, which would state in its complete language, developers shall prepare and process documents for a tract map. The tract map shall be effective when the certificate of compliance and deeds has been recorded. No permit will be issued prior to, and this is the change, final submittal and subject to the limitations of the Subdivision Map Act. Would be the language change. Not unusual, and something that state law provides for. We've no objection to the modification in the language.
Thank you, David. Applicant, would you like to proceed?
Good evening, commissioners, and thank you for listening to me tonight, for your time today, and also thank you for planning staff for all the hard work that you've had on this project. My name is Nick Patterson, and I'm here to represent City Ventures and to discuss our project related to the development at 10130 Adela Avenue. Our design team is comprised of KTG Weiser Architects, C2 Collaborative as our landscape architects, and C&V Consulting as our civil engineers. Together, we've all worked on dozens of projects throughout the state of California. A little bit about who City Ventures is. We are first and foremost a home builder with the goal to provide well-built and attainable homes and communities throughout the state. We have a strong track record in California with over 150 entitled communities and 10,000 homes built. We're also a 100% electric home builder, utilizing solar to power our projects. We specialize in sustainable infill development that aligns with local and state housing goals. This project is no exception. Here are a few examples of projects we built over the years. We always ensure that our communities are well thought out and have a great balance between indoor and outdoor experience for both future homeowners and their guests. Currently, the site sits vacant on a rectangular piece of land. The site previously went through a soil remediation and underground storage tank removal. These actions were overseen by LA County Fire and the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and the cases have been therefore closed out. There will be additional testing after site grading occurs, and vapor barriers will be placed under all buildings. With residential neighborhoods to the south, we think this is a prime location for our project, and we will work with the city, neighbors, and nearby school to ensure that our construction does not cause any disturbance. And here are additional views of the site. So as Rodrigo mentioned in his presentation, our project is on a 2.02 acre parcel with the subdivision, we're creating 54 new lots with a density of 25.5 homes per acre. The site is also part of the city's Tweedy Boulevard specific plan, which identifies the site as a prime opportunity for new housing. The project also went through the full CEQA analysis where it was deemed to have no major environmental impact and was exempt through Class 32 infill exemption. And in addition to Rodrigo's site plan, here's our landscaping plan that has a little bit more green and some color for you. You'll notice here that all the buildings are oriented perpendicular to the road as well as the neighbors to the south. This is to ensure that there's not long views of buildings and windows looking directly at those homes. as well as providing as much common open space as we can. Here in the orange, you'll see the common open space for residents and their guests to use. And then in the purple blue dash section, those are all private patios on the ground level for residents to use at their discretion. As mentioned earlier, we're a 100% electric home builder, but as we also focus on developing smart and efficient homes. We keep up with new technologies to ensure our homes are keeping costs low for the residents and communities. Thank you for your time tonight. I hope that you guys think this project is as great as we do, and we look forward to hearing any questions that you have and answering them, as well as approving the vesting tentative tract map, as well as approving the conditions that we discussed. And as David mentioned earlier, just altering condition number 37. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. If we have any questions, we'll bring you right up. Thank you. So we're going to go ahead and open this up to public comment. I just want to once again provide a little reminder. I know some of you just arrived to the meeting. We ask that you please respect each other's voice. If you agree or you disagree, we just hope that you can keep your comments to yourself until you are given the opportunity to get in front of the mic and provide your commentary. It's just common courtesy to respect each other. We all have different views, but we all can respect each other on that end. So once again, we're going to go ahead and open it up to public comment. So would anybody have any public comment regarding this agenda item? Please feel free to line up here on the right-hand side and come up to the mic. So if you do have any comments on this particular item, we ask if you can go ahead and line up against the wall. You're perfect there, ma'am. But for any other additional commentary, feel free to line up right against that wire to the left side so that we can expedite the process. Go ahead, man. So we'll ask one mic. We'll ask you to state your name and I think we asked for address. Is that right? And then you have 3 minutes. You can view here, we have a 3-minute clock here that will track your time, and we ask that you please respect that. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Oh, wow, okay. All right, my name is Rosanna La Rosa. I reside at 5205 Elmira Road. And as I said, I don't oppose the building of the 54 units. I think it looks very nice. I'm not totally comfortable with one aspect of it, which is the removal of the blockade on Adela Lane there. I think it's called Adela Lane, yeah. And my concern is the impact from the traffic. These are going to be 3-bedroom units. Could probably guarantee each unit would have at least 2 cars. And that's going to increase traffic considerably. And if that blockade is removed, our little residential area from Aldrich to, I'm not sure what the first street is, Annahurst maybe, is going to be impacted. I think that's pretty obvious. We already have a serious situation on Wright Road. And I don't want to see a number of cars trying to circumvent Tweedy, going down Tweedy Lane to exit, coming down, racing down our streets to turn right or left on Wright Road. And I'm going to just read you from the general plan here that, as you know, that the city designated neighborhoods to be low, medium, high. We're considered a low neighborhood. And this was done, I'm quoting you here, this was done to ensure stability of these areas for current residents and to support one of the primary guiding principles of the general plan, which is the preservation of existing neighborhoods. And I will now quote you from page 92. To preserve the character of existing neighborhoods, and P.2 says, Existing neighborhoods should be preserved and protected against potential impacts related to development, including traffic. And that is my primary concern, because, as I said, we're already impacted on Wright Road. And I hate to see that increase. I appreciate the project. I appreciate the development in the city. I applaud that. But I do also want to preserve the neighborhood that I live in. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next comment, please. Next.
Hello. My name is Rosemary Sayas. I work for Communities for a Better Environment, one of the local youth organizers in this area. I actually am attending to talk about a different agenda item, so just kind of learning a bit more about this one. I actually used to live down the block on Wright Road, actually, from this site. And I know it's actually been on our radar for contamination, VOCs more specifically. While I understand there is there was a CEQA analysis class 32 exemption, categorical exemption. I don't think that entirely rules out potential exposure. One of the things that comes to mind when we talk about these projects are when we do construction right, when we interrupt like soil, do things like that. I'm also concerned about potential exposure. I'm not sure how long the project itself would be, but I would like to know more about it. I'm also not sure where we can find that PowerPoint. If we're able to look at that, that would be helpful. But another thing I thought about, right, as we talk with community members, which I know a handful of them are here today, both our youth and adult membership, when we talk about housing and projects for the community, a lot of the questions we also get, right, are, is this going to be affordable housing we can actually afford? Because that's another factor that's come into question, is housing being a major issue in this area, and being able to pay rent. At this point, right, we're having 1 bedrooms for almost $2,000. People here, right, can't afford that. So it's another thing I'm looking into, and our organization has worked, right, with different housing agencies. So we're more than happy to also meet with folks to better understand and learn and see how we can, move forward. We definitely want housing, but we want to make sure it's on safe, conditions, and it's not exposing people, and we're not just, settling, understanding that there is still a lot of contamination to deal with. But I think my time's kind of running out here, so I think I'm okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, Matt, please. Thank you very much.
Hi. My name is Jennifer Ganata. I'm also of Communities for a Better Environment. I am the legal department co-director, and I was looking at this site also because of its close proximity to the high school, where we do have youth organizing that takes place nearby. I think the issue, though, that I wanted actually more clarification, since it's being slated to have a CEQA exemption, is talking about the vapor intrusion and the types of barriers. I think when we see a lot of, projects that have barriers, there's oftentimes a high percentage of a fail rate at some point. So I guess, is there air monitoring at that site? What type of air monitoring is going to happen, and how do we make sure the vapor intrusion that may come up from the site, because it was, I believe it used to be the Riverton Steel site. Just wondering what that process looks like, and kind of to uplift what Rosemary was saying. I think I also understand that this might also be condominiums versus apartments. I'm not sure. And if there are, what are the processes for first-time homeowners? How do we engage the community in the actual being able to enter into those units? So I feel like, as our organization is based in Southeast LA, what we've been trying to figure out is, what does equitable development look like? How do communities that have been left out of conversations in terms of development actually get to participate in that conversation of what are the best needs for the community? So thank you for bringing this up. And I think having deeply affordable housing and housing that can go to the communities is probably something that should be prioritized. And if there's any way that the developer can think about how that may benefit the community, that might be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next comment.
Good evening. My name is Marissa Delgado. I am a resident on Aldridge, 5305, which means I would have first view of the development. Thank you very much to the developers for actually taking us into consideration and planning the buildings to be the other direction, because I did fear somebody just staring right at me. But my concern for the city is, like the other resident, the barrier, because we already are affected by the 2 schools that were built, and traffic on Wright Road is horrible during the mornings. It could take anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes just to exit out of my street. So seeing 3-bedroom home residents being built does cause some concern. And even in case of emergencies, just for firefighters to get into that area. So I hope the city takes that into account and really preserves our neighborhood, because if you open up that street, it's just gonna create another nightmare for us. And having that many apartments, it's also gonna create parking issues within our neighborhood, because now not only are we gonna have parking wars between residents that already exist, but the new ones that are coming in. I know I can't ask for questions, but I hope you also take into consideration the noise when this is being built and the dust that it's going to create to us, because as it is, that building is vacant and there's a ton of dust that already comes to us from that and the park that's being developed. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. Hello, my name is Lisette Patres. I am also a resident of Southgate. I've been a resident for over 30 years. I also live in the adjacent neighborhood that lives next to the proposed development. My primary concern, as well as other residents have shared, is removing that critical barrier that currently is on Adela, which is really currently protecting us from overflow traffic, as mentioned by other residents. We value the peacefulness that we currently have in our community, and I appreciated that in the presentation he mentioned that he wants to work with the neighborhood to make sure that we maintain not only the integrity of our neighborhood, but also the peacefulness. My concern is that if we open this critical barrier that currently protects us from that overflow of traffic, that it's not only going to increase any safety issues, because vehicles are already trying to bypass the traffic. They're going through our streets, trying to find a faster way through the neighborhood, but also because of the high school, we've already seen the chaos, and the 2 schools that are there, the chaos that it creates. So again, my concern is that it's going to create a safety hazard. It's going to disrupt our quiet residential environment that we all value so much. And we really don't think that it should be a burden on our neighborhood in order for this development to go through. So I do urge you that you do reject any plans that requires the removal of this barrier, and to protect our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening. My name is Carlos Gallegos. I reside at 5266 Alameda Road. And like my neighbors have said in the past and previously before me, my biggest concern is the barrier, the removal of the barrier, the increased traffic. I'm against, to be honest, I'm against new build in general. I grew up in Inglewood, and I've seen in the past years the impact of new builds and traffic and noise. And so I totally oppose the build. I oppose the removal of that barrier. And I wish we, as a community, I wish we would have had a little bit more notice, given more notice, so some of my neighbors are able to be present. I know some of our neighbors, I spoke to some of them, and I know they couldn't be here in person because they were on vacation or they were out of town or they just couldn't make it. But I think we didn't receive sufficient notice to attend this particular meeting. I think our neighbors, I think we could get together and fill out a petition or something. But yeah, I totally oppose the new construction and oppose the removal of that barrier. That's going to bring in traffic, and it's just going to currently it's a peaceful neighborhood. There's not as much traffic, and that's my biggest concern, that our peace is going to be taken away from us with this new build. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Please, once again,
Yeah,
no
it-
clapping.
If I could, during these public hearings, folks, you really need to think of this chamber as a courthouse. You wouldn't applaud or cheer to testimony before a judge. We ask the same respect here so that everyone can state their views. And also, we're recording this, and if there's too much noise in the audience, we can't pick up what the testimony is from your neighbors. So, if you could please refrain from the applause or the other comments, we would really appreciate it.
Good evening. My name is Patricia Navarro, and I've been a Southgate resident for 40 years. I've been living at Almira for 28 years. I am very concerned regarding the barriers that are protecting our community. I see everybody speaking about the complex, the condominiums, and I don't hear anybody saying about the traffic. Traffic going, how is that going to relieve the traffic from Almira? I mean, from to Wright Road to Tweedy. As it is, we're very impacted every day, as the other residents said. It's very hard to try to get out in the mornings, in the evenings. Also, we are a very tight-knit community, and I feel that if we remove those barriers, we're going to have all that overflow from the two schools. And I don't think it's fair that our community gets impacted from all that traffic that is coming out through those two schools. Especially now, if that apartment building is, going to be built, are they going to have a underground parking lot for this community? Because if you remove that barrier, guess what? We're already struggling as it is to sometimes look for parking as a resident. And if we have that overflow from that complex, we're the one that are even going to have a hard time trying to find a parking ourselves. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any additional comments? Going once, going twice. Okay, we'll go to comments submitted via email. I think city staff.
Yes, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I can summarize the correspondence the city has received since the Planning Commission packet was published. We've received 4 pieces of correspondence. One from Carolina Garcia expressing questions on project details, but stating support for new housing in the community. Also a piece of correspondence from Mr. Mario Dominguez supporting the project. A piece of correspondence from Felix Hernandez urging the Planning Commission to consider impacts of the project on the neighborhood, but neither opposing or supporting the project. And finally, a piece of correspondence from the LA Unified School District with a list of concerns for construction impacts and requests that that their comments be considered within your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. And those comments submitted via email are also available.
I'm sorry. Yes, those are. We've got those comments in writing. They've been provided to the commission, and they will become part of the formal record. Yes.
Thank you.
Hello.
Ma'am, I think we'll go ahead. Just give your public comment. We kind of already moved on from that version, but I'll let you go ahead and speak. But you'll be the last comment here on this agenda.
I can say something.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, my name is Susan Janer. My family has lived on Batavia Road for over 75 years. Okay, longer than most people. And one thing that I didn't hear other people say is that because there's Amazon trucks on Wright Road all the time, there's a lot of traffic. That's a fact. There's a lot of traffic, and when the school opens and the kids go to school, there's more traffic. And I think that there's also a safety issue about the entrance and exit from Tweedy to where this building is going to be built. If there was a fire or a problem, it would be a big problem because how the fire truck's going to get in if there's all this traffic. That's my concern, one of my concerns. And I just did not know that they were planning to take off the barrier. No. You know, I mentioned that we've been there for a long time, my family. I raised my kids there. And there's a lot of families with children living in my neighborhood. If you open those barriers, there's going to be so much traffic. Okay, my time is almost up, right? Okay, so that's my concern. I'm really concerned about the traffic and the safety. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So we'll go ahead and move on to questions. Staff, do you want to respond to any questions posed by?
And Mr. Chairman, if I might, I'm happy to hit some general themes, and you may have some specific follow-up from that. But a couple of responses and perhaps some commentary. Looking at the comments from the speakers, it felt like they fell into one of two major themes. Concern for the K-rail barrier that exists today and its removal, and then the other issues on general contamination and what's been done at the site and how we'll have those checks and balances in place. Just to speak for a moment on the street blockade, the K-rail that is in place, and there may be some misunderstanding. Draft condition 60 in your packet is specifically outlines what our Public Works Department is proposing. This is something that at the staff level, we've had quite a bit of discussion on. The idea of removing that K-rail, may be a little misunderstood. And let me just read an excerpt from that condition, that draft condition. As part of the project, the applicant is required to replace the existing K-rail barrier near the intersection of Adela and Legacy Lane with an automated arm gate or like device, parentheses, automated unit, to allow emergency vehicle access and non-restricted access at, and this is key, at designated times as determined by the city. The city fully recognizes and appreciates the residents' comments on concern for the school traffic, the impacts to the neighborhood that could create, and at all times will the city be respecting those needs and concerns for the neighborhood. In fact, it's my understanding there are actually protections in place from the analysis and work that was done for the school that calls for that limitation. So those would absolutely need to be respected. What our Public Works colleagues are proposing is a replacement, if you will, of that non-flexible closure with something that can be opened primarily for emergency access should it be needed, providing not only better access potentially in an emergency both to the school, to this new development, as well as to the existing neighborhood. What and when any other hours of non-restricted access is something that the city would be working on through our Public Works Department with a mind's eye and a goal towards alleviating as many impacts, but providing additional flexibility and thus actually improving the circulation, local circulation. So that's the goal, and I assure you, Public Works folks actually absolutely have in mind those protections to the neighborhood, and those would remain. On the matter of contamination, there's been quite a lot of work done, as staff has recently learned. The applicant, in fact, could probably speak more completely to this, but as I understand it, a lot has been done, analyzed, work has taken place to clear environmental clearance from various outside agencies. The agency that has oversight for some final pieces that need to happen with non-permeable membranes that have to go down, vapor barriers, if you will, and the monitoring of that is the LA County Fire Department. We will absolutely have to have LA County Fire Department's sign off and approval of those final measures before we can issue building permits, construction permits. So those safeguards are built in. They're again outside the, for the most part, outside the local control of the city, but with those regional entities as they should be for regional impacts. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention, and it's probably an important just procedural acknowledgement. What the commission has before it tonight, as Mr. Palaio has indicated, is the subdivision map. The city's zoning controls affords this developer and other property owners in town an ability to go through administrative review at the staff level for projects of this type. And so the commission's focus is, while it's narrow to the subdivision map, these peripheral issues are certainly something that we want to make sure you have understanding of, and that you can consider within your subdivision map decision. But with that, I think I've worn out my notes, unless the rest of the staff has any further comment.
Maybe two additional themes that I noticed is, well, maybe not a theme, but someone mentioned about notices. Was the community notified that this was going to be on the agenda? And if so, when did that take place?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, it would have met the notice. We do try to get word out as best as possible. I know City Ventures has done some neighborhood outreach, but best made efforts and meeting the legal tests sometimes doesn't reach everyone, but it has been noticed to the extent of.
And I would also add that state law only requires us to notice residents within 300 feet, and the city has taken the bigger step and generally sends out notices within 1,000 feet. So we've gone above and beyond the call of state law.
And just to add to that, we also notice not only owners, but occupants. So sometimes you have people that own the property but don't live there. They get noticed outside Southgate. We also send notices out to the occupants living in that area, or if they're in apartments, every unit in the apartment complex.
Great. And my other, I guess the other thing that did come up is there on-site parking? And if so, how many designated spaces per unit?
I can speak to that. So each unit's proposed to have its two-car garage in tandem formation. The project itself doesn't propose, or it's not proposing any additional like guest parking. But it's important to note that this project it's being reviewed administratively, but also under the lens of the state density bonus law and inclusionary housing requirements. Therefore, through those state provisions, the applicant's entitled for more lax parking requirements as opposed to the city's local development standards, which would normally require additional guest parking.
Thank you.
Hi, if I could add one other tool the community may not be aware of. Thank you for the chance to interject. Parking is definitely a growing concern in many of our neighborhoods, and as our planner Rodrigo was mentioning, there are limited abilities of the city to enforce the requirement for parking due to the state pushing housing further and further into a mandate versus an option. So our tools are limited. A tool the city does have and neighborhoods do have is a residential permit parking program. You could investigate that. It's online on the city's website. Some neighborhoods are doing this. You take your whatever size area you want to investigate. You see if you can have over 50% of your residents vote in favor of getting a permit program. Then that area that's you've chosen to have outlined, our Public Works Department helps with the survey and the process. If it gets voted in, each parcel gets 2 parking permits, chits that you get for the street. So anybody who doesn't have one of those passes gets ticketed, and the city can enforce that. So some neighborhoods have done that. It's up to the neighborhood and the majority of the neighborhood, but it is a way that you could enforce, have some control over who's in your neighborhood. So people outside your neighborhood, if they're parked there, they won't be allowed. So just a tool that's available to anyone, regardless if you're new here or anywhere in the city. But a lot of people aren't aware of that. And it is effective.
Thank you. Sorry, I'll open it up to my colleagues here.
Thank you. So this item came up, this property came up 4 years ago, and back then it was a different project. I remember it was a apartment complex that was set to be built with affordable housing. And so I remember back then affordable housing was a big concern for the community. And I mean real affordable housing, not something that's really not attainable by our community members. And so I do want to ask if you could, talk to that to see what we can do to make sure that perhaps, I mean, do we have that ability to negotiate whether some of these condos can be affordable, can be given priority to the community? My concern back then personally was the environmental concerns. I am very familiar with the area. I do live on that side of Southgate now. Professionally, I am an environmental consultant, so I am very familiar with the contamination issues, and I did bring that up 4 years ago when this came up to council. And back then, I was dismissed with my concerns about the environmental conditions of the property. I do remember staff telling me that because they did have a ND for CEQA, that it meant that the site had no environmental concerns, which is not true. They did do, my understanding is that, there was a follow-up investigation, remediation was done. There has been soil that has been, that was contaminated, that was excavated out of the property. The information available online on a GeoTracker website, which documents cleanup sites, was very limited. So I did submit a Freedom of Information request for records, and I was able to talk to the staff that are in charge of overseeing the cleanup, and I did do that today. And so my concern, and the reason I kind of went, and did further research, was knowing that there is residual contamination on the parcel, and whether that contamination and the vapor mitigation recommendations by the fire department were going to be affected by subdividing the parcel. And so I did check with staff from the fire department, who assured me that that shouldn't be a concern, because they would have to be, like, Mr. Crabtree said, they would have to sign off on the development of the site. And so my follow-up concern, and something that the staff wasn't able to assure, was the testing, follow-up testing, like Jan Ganata mentioned regarding the soil vapor intrusion. From my understanding, the fire department asked the properties to do additional soil gas sampling, because the site has been graded. So my question is, if the property is going to change ownership, will the new ownership go under an agreement, a voluntary cleanup agreement with the fire department, to continue the soil testing, to install the soil vapor barrier, and what follow-up indoor air quality testing will they do? How often will they do it? Will they do a maintenance agreement for the property to, we don't know what the soil vapor conditions are in the property right now. Soil vapor can be very dangerous depending on what the concentration is. Groundwater, I know, is very shallow in the area, so it's a potential concern. And it's an important concern because, if depending on the contamination, it can really affect the occupants. And professionally speaking, I've conducted indoor air sampling at contaminated properties, and it's really heartbreaking to see these systems failed. I have personally seen it, and it does happen. And I understand that there's new technology, but I think that the follow-up sampling is important. And that's the reason I went and looked into this, because, you know, we're the first people to really look into it, and the first step to kind of approve this going forward. So I want to know if the city has looked into what we can do to make sure that that happens.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if you're looking for some feedback, and I will ask for the input of our city attorney as we get into some of this dialogue. It's one of those where, first and foremost, please know these are absolutely important considerations, and something that you know, is very important to the, you know, well-being of the community. And my comments are not at all dismissive or minimizing any of those things. But there are certain things that are out of the jurisdictional control of the city of Southgate and are held by regional authorities, that we do have some checks and balances in the system and in place. As I mentioned earlier, LA County Fire does need to sign off on the approval before we can issue building permits. What within their scope addresses the specific, you know, air monitoring and so forth, I couldn't begin to tell you, simply because we're not the authority on these things. It may well be that the applicant has some information that they would be willing to share, should that be, you know, the commission's desire. But you know, it might be good for us to have the
And it's my understanding. And my other question too is if whether the city has any other properties, any residential properties with vapor mitigation measures taken in place, because it's my understanding that there has to be an engineer that is very familiar with these systems. They're very complicated. They do need adjustments from time to time. They do need follow-up sampling. And so my concern is, you know, I do see that I think item number 13 adds inspection fees. And if we don't have a staff that is equipped to handle that, you know, are these inspection fees enough to cover somebody who can review and approve those types of inspections?
I think we're getting a little off track here. We're straying from the track map approval for this property. I would say that the 4 years ago, you're absolutely right. There was concern for the property. There was investigations. There was a remediation plan that was back in 2021 and 2024. The fire department, that's the agency that is legally obligated to oversee the investigation, actually prepared a summary letter indicating that the contaminated soil was actually excavated from the property, put onto trucks, driven, you know, someplace to a regulated soils depository. That contaminated soil is not anywhere in Southgate anymore. Clean soil was put into its place. And the fire department did say, you know, essentially the property is clean, but for the possibility of you know, soil vapor. And for that reason, they said that if you're going to build a building on here, you must first not only include a vapor intrusion barrier so that those soils can't get into the building that you're building and can't hurt the residents, but also after the property has been graded and the soil vapors have been laid, testing must take place to ensure that those soil vapor barriers work. So, and I do believe that the applicant indicated that they put soil vapor barriers under all of their buildings. So yes, it's a concern, but we do have evidence that generally this property is pretty clean. And to the extent that there are vapor issues, those at the building permit stage are going to be addressed.
Thank you. Any other questions, Commissioner?
No, that's it for now.
Questions?
Yes, I believe I share the same sentiments as my colleagues. I am concerned for the quality of life in the neighborhood in this area. Living in front of a school myself, I see the implications that traffic can cause. And I do have some questions. I don't know, Rodrigo, if you can answer some of these questions for me. I know Mr. Crabtree did elaborate a little bit on the barrier, but I wasn't sure if it's the same thing that I'm going to ask. So maybe you can answer. Adela is not a through street, right? So are they opening up Legacy, the Legacy Avenue lane?
You asked if they're going to open up
Mhm.
Lacey
Is
Lane?
that going to be, is that the barrier that you guys talk about, or?
It's the barrier that's located, let me pull this up really quickly. My presentation, please. So that's at, let's say the southwest corner of the project site. So it's along Adela Avenue. Okay, so it's located at this intersection here of Legacy Lane, or actually it's where Legacy Lane turns and it converts into Adela down here. But there's a K-rail located at that southwest corner of the site. And what the Public Works Department is conditioning the project with is to replace that barrier with an alternative design. So in essence, there will still be a barrier until they further studies are conducted and see what's warranted to see if there's any other.
So basically, right now, there's really nothing in place. It's just, it'll be open, but not sure what. will go
It's
there.
currently closed off at the barrier, and it's going to remain closed off.
Okay, and then my other question is kind of similar to what my colleagues asked about parking. Can you clarify the parking situation?
So the project site does have sufficient parking in accordance with the state law. Each unit would have its 2-car garage, which is in line with the state law. No guest parking is being proposed.
Okay, and lastly, my last question is, it was mentioned that it's 6 units that are being offered at a moderate income level. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Also, I wasn't sure, are these condominiums for sale or for rent?
Yes, so the townhome development is going to be for sale. As far as the affordability levels, it goes based on the definition of the HUD, or Housing and Urban Development Department, from pretty much national. They have a clear definition as to what is affordable. There's different affordability levels. So this project needs to comply with those thresholds. So we would have to make sure that there's an agreement between the city to ensure that all of that gets captured and the development maintains those affordability levels at a certain period of time.
Right. I'd just add there are 54 units, and they're meeting your inclusionary ordinance, which would call for, at the level they're reserving, it's 5% of the units at I believe it's very low affordability level, in line with the thresholds that Rodrigo's outlined. And so those would be locked in and made available and reserved at those affordability levels.
Just a bit more regarding the thresholds of affordability levels. So they're based on the median income of the census, based on the census. So maybe the applicant can elaborate more as to what those specific thresholds are.
Yep. Applicant, would you please?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify, we are providing moderate level affordable units here. And those are, as Rodrigo pointed out, are determined by HUD and the area median income. These units, the 6 that we're proposing for the moderates, would be sold in the mid 300,000s. There's a specific dollar price that's listed by by HUD, and that's what we'd stick those to, and they would be required to be affordable for a certain amount of years as well.
Any additional comment or questions for the applicant?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you, staff, for providing clarity and answering questions. Commissioners, how would you like to proceed? Do we get a motion?
I still didn't see one of the questions asked by one of the audience members about the possibility of working with the community to really engage them in being a part of the construction process of, being guided to being able to purchase some of these homes. I personally see the need for housing as somebody who was barely able to purchase a property a couple of years ago, being college educated, me and my partner being college educated, making okay living. It's a really hard market, and um, I understand our community's concerns with traffic, but I also, last time remember hearing a lot of people wanting to be able to purchase, wanting to be able to move out of their parents' homes within our city, but stay within our city. That was personally my goal. As somebody who grew up in Southeast LA, who's lived in Southgate since 2006, to be able to stay in my community where I volunteer, where I, you know, do everything. And so I don't know if you can speak to that.
And Mr. Chairman, I can offer some comment, and certainly you're welcome to call upon the applicant. I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I can tell you to Commissioner Ruiz's comments, in my experience working with housing developers that have an affordable component in their project, they are all too ready to want to engage with the local community and explain and frankly market their program and the availability of these units. They want to find qualified buyers, and if there's a natural match with someone in town, that's great. I've personally worked with this particular developer in other cities that I've represented in my career, and have always found City Ventures very good about the outreach they do with making sure the community, the local community, is aware of the units, what the qualification criteria is, and so forth. They will need to coordinate with the city on, the affordable housing agreement, any of the needs that the city has in that respect. We are somewhat limited by law in terms of any insistence the city has on telling them who they can sell to, of course. But in my experience with developers like this, they're all too willing to want to market to the local community and be good community partners. But offer that for your deliberations as you go on.
As far as enforcing those vapor intrusion concerns, is that something that can be enforced through one of the recommendations here?
I don't want to sugarcoat it for you. The city of Southgate has limited to no control over some of these issues. They're simply out of our jurisdictional control. But what we can do is be a good advocate for these things, and working with LA County Fire particularly, and making sure, and talking with our building staff, our building division manager, as these plans are coming through for coordination, making sure we're having that critical communication with LA Fire. And absolutely, if that is the direction of this commission, we will make sure that that is captured and conveyed to the staff. So there's, an awareness, if you will, of the importance of those issues. I can assure you there already is, but it's one of those that, as development is now happening on these kinds of lands, that a renewed awareness of that and the importance to the community and our decision makers is something that's good to emphasize.
Yeah, no, and it's definitely something that's really important, because a lot of the empty lots within our city are former industrial sites. And, as we will see in the next item, a lot of these areas are undergoing, rezoning. And so I think it's something that needs to be taken very serious, regardless of what is going to be built, whether it's commercial or residential. And schools, for whatever reason, Legacy High School was built where it is now, and there is contamination there. So that's definitely something that our community needs to be aware of, and keep these properties in check.
Well, thank you very much. I want to make sure I thank the residents for coming out and providing feedback. I hope that we were able to answer all of your questions and concerns. On that note, I want to applaud the staff and the developers for doing what they can and within their jurisdiction. So thank you very much. So I'd like to make a motion to move forward with the proposed request with amendment to number 37. Is that correct?
Correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that the modification to condition 37, the final sentence would read, "No permit will be issued prior to final submittal and subject to the limitations of the Subdivision Map Act." Thank you.
Thank you. Roll call? Yes, please. Second, does anybody want to second that?
Can you elaborate on what those limitations are in the MAP Act?
I'm sorry. I didn't hear the.
Oh, what
Question.
that change does, the
Oh, sure, to
limitations
that
that I'm-
condition?
yeah.
Yeah. You know, the applicant has, I mean, their goal is to get this thing underway, get it constructed. With the units being available for sale, that's the action before you tonight. That's why you have this map. Their concern is, you know, some of the technical wording as draft condition 37 was expressed, actually unintentionally may be interpreted to artificially limit them. They're simply looking to what they're entitled to for timing under the State Subdivision Map Act. And we're, of course, absolutely fine with that. So it's really just clarifying language. You know, the language as it had been drafted, "No permit will be issued prior to recordation," is actually somewhat inconsistent with the terminology in the Subdivision Map Act. And so this would clean that up. It's more a housekeeping matter, really. It's not anything that gives them anything that they would not otherwise be due under the law. And so
And this still needs to go to final approval to council, right?
the map would, yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Got to get a second.
I'll second.
Commissioner Prieto,
No.
Commissioner Ruiz,
Yes.
Chairperson Osaeta.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item number 2, appeal of the Director of Community Development's determination for a property located at 8530 Alameda Street and determining the action is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. 1, conduct a public hearing pursuant to Southgate's Municipal Code Section 11.50.04.b. Accept the determination that this matter is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. 3, adopt the findings as outlined in Resolution Number 2025-04. And number 4, uphold the determination of the Director of Community Development that the legal nonconforming use for a metal processing and/or recycling activities at the subject property have been abandoned and can no longer be conducted, and the use of the site for truck trailer storage as a principal use unrelated to metal processing/recycling activities is not legal nonconforming use and must be immediately terminated.
City staff?
Good evening, Chairperson Zeta, members of the Planning Commission. The item before you tonight is an appeal of director's decision for property located at 8530 Alameda Street. The appellant owner is the Alameda Engel Properties, represented by Jason Engel. The representative is by Somos Law Group, represented by Sarah Atzbaha. And the request is a consideration of an appeal of the director's determination that the legal nonconforming use for metal processing and or recycling activities have been abandoned and can no longer be conducted. And also that the use for truck trailer storage as a principal use unrelated to the metal processing recycling activities is not a legal nonconforming use and must be immediately terminated. So just to give you a little bit of the background on this property, back around 1961, the property was zoned heavy manufacturing, or M3. And around 1973, the metal processing recycling facility started to operate by Jack Engel and Company and or Alameda Engel Properties. The site was developed with industrial structures, and there were metal recycling operations that included delivery of scrap metal products, sorting and processing, and preparation for shipment. And then in 1988, the zoning code was amended by the city. It required a conditional use permit for recycling facilities. However, any existing use would be determined legal non-conforming under Southgate Municipal Code, Chapter 11.55, the non-conforming uses and buildings section. So even though this was operating at that time, it was still considered legal non-conforming and did not was not required to get a conditional use permit. In 2015, the city then adopted ordinance number 2323, which further amended the zoning code, including changing the zone of the subject property to industrial flex or IF. And under the industrial flex zone, recycling facilities are required to get a conditional use permit. However, any existing recycling operations were deemed to be legal non-conforming, and they were allowed to continue in accordance with the Southgate Municipal Code, Chapter 11.55, which is the non-conforming uses in buildings section. Around March of 2020, all the metal recycling operations at the site ceased. The structure utilized to conduct metal recycling was demolished at that site, and a new tenant, which is Fleet Yards Incorporated, commenced utilizing the site solely for the storage of truck trailers and/or containers as a principal use. Afterwards, in July 2020, the city approved Fleet Yards Incorporated's temporary use permit, TUP 2020-01, which authorized the use for truck trailer storage for a 1-year period of time with possible extensions up to a maximum period of 5 years from the date of approval, so the date being July 2020. TUP 2020-01 expired in July 2021, since no timely renewal was applied for. And in December 2022, the community development director at the time advised Fleet Yards Incorporated that several conditions were not met and that the temporary use permit was ineligible for renewal. Under our code, the maximum duration for a temporary use permit is to be 3 days in a row or 10 working days in a calendar year. And so the TUP that was actually issued exceeded that amount. On May 2nd, 2023, the Planning Commission on appeal, the applicant appealed the director's decision at that time, so it went to Planning Commission. And in 2023, Planning Commission upheld the director's determination to deny the temporary use permit extension. The owner wanted to appeal the Planning Commission's decision to City Council, but the city and appellant agreed to stay the scheduling of the appeal hearing pending this hearing on the legal nonconformity. So more of the background, the appellant contended that truck trailer storage activities are legal nonconforming. The appellant bears a burden to approving the legal nonconforming status of truck trailer storage, and staff feels that we have provided the appellant ample opportunities to present sufficient evidence to support their contention. On January 21st of this year, after reviewing public records and documents submitted by the appellant, the interim community development director, Mr. David Crabtree, issued a determination and noncompliance letter, which indicated that the legal nonconforming use, including integral truck trailer storage components, was abandoned for at least 2 consecutive years, and the use can no longer be conducted unless otherwise in conformity to all current laws and regulations as presented in the Southgate Municipal Code. And also that the use for truck trailer storage as a principal use, not associated with recycling operations, is not a legal nonconforming use and must be immediately terminated. And just to give you some background on the property in question, the blue area there shows the subject site, which is about 6.78 acres. It's located in the northwestern section or portion of the city of Southgate. Surrounding the property is actually LA County unincorporated land to the west, north, and this portion here to the east. To the south, you have FHC, which is currently operating, and you have the further east over there, you have the East LA Community College off of Firestone and Santa Fe Avenue. This shows a close-up of the subject property at 8530 Alameda Street. I should mention that the property owner also owns the property to the north, which is in LA County unincorporated. That's at 8440 Alameda Street, located in this location. It's roughly 2.96 acres. Access to the subject property at 8530, which is in the city of Southgate, is through the property to the north in LA County, and the ingress, egress, the in and out, going in and out to and from the properties is from Alameda Street across the Alameda corridor, that underground trail area there. There is a driveway there that connects the properties, and that's really the only access you have onto the property. This shows the entrance that I just pointed out. That entrance is in the LA County unincorporated area. You'd enter through that driveway. The property in question would be to the south, and this is sort of looking southeast. So you can see the FHC building located in the background. So in regards to the appeal, after the director had issued the determination letter, the appellant filed a timely appeal on February 6, 2025, based on the following grounds. There's 4 of them. The first one being that the determination was unsupported by the Southgate Municipal Code, that the determination was between the ancillary and primary use was an error, and that the immediate termination is inconsistent with the Southgate Municipal Code and general plan, and that determination violates procedural requirements. The second ground is that the substantive and procedural due process concerns, or in regards to the concerns about the substantive and procedural due process. The third being the termination of illegal nonconforming use is a de facto regulatory taking. And the fourth issue was that the city failed to comply with the California Environmental Quality Act. And staff's response to that is, it's set forth in greater detail in the staff report, but this is a summary of what's in the staff report. Staff refutes the appellant's contentions in that the director properly determined that the appellant failed to prove that truck trailer storage independent of recycling activities is a legal nonconforming use. We feel that the director's determination is supported by the evidence, which includes the required findings, and is consistent with the requirements of the Southgate Municipal Code. We feel that the director's determination does not contradict the general plan, that the appellant has been provided required due process protections, which includes this appeal being heard tonight, and that the termination of the appellant's legal nonconforming use of the site for recycling activities is not a de facto regulatory taking, especially since the appellant abandoned that use. Terminating the illegal use of the site for truck trailer storage is not a taking at all. In regards to the environmental analysis, in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act, director's determination qualifies for a categorical exemption under Class 21 enforcement actions by the regulatory agencies, and that the city is enforcing the municipal code. There's a determination on termination that's not subject to CEQA. It's not an approval. It does not commit the city to any definite course of action, and CEQA does not apply to projects which a public agency rejects or disapproves. In conclusion, staff recommends that the Planning Commission uphold the director's determination that the legal nonconforming use for metal processing and or recycling activities has been abandoned for more than 2 continuous years. It ceased to operate in 2020, and that use can no longer be conducted at the site. And also the use of the site for truck trailer storage as a principal use. That's the use that came into place in 2020 after the recycling facility had left. We feel that use is, as a principal use, independent of recycling activities, is not a legal nonconforming use. It wasn't there before. It was, I guess, an ancillary use to the recycling activities done previously, but it was never a principal use. And so with that, our recommendation is that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing pursuant to Southgate Municipal Code Section 11.50.040B, accept the determination that this matter is exempt from CEQA, adopt the findings as outlined in resolution number 2025-04, which is attached to the staff report, Assembly Bill, and uphold the determination of the Director of Community Development that the legal nonconforming use for metal processing and or recycling activities at the subject property have been abandoned and can no longer be conducted, and the use of the site for truck trailer storage as a principal use unrelated to metal processing and/or recycling activities is not a legal non-conforming use and must be immediately terminated. And that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions. And also, just to mention, I should mention, we do have our attorneys here as well that helped us with this case, if you have any questions for them.
Thank you. Is the appellant here? Will they be saying a few words? Do they have a presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Just one, if you can give me 1 minute, just a friendly reminder to those of you that are joining us today, if you can please keep your comments to yourself. No clapping, no cheering, no booing, please keep your comments to yourself. We want to make sure we respect each other's voice. So thank you very much. Once again, you will be providing a warning if that is not respected. We'll seek legal counsel to provide additional guidance on how we proceed. But please just respect each other, please. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners, Honorable Chairperson. My name is Alfred Fryeho. I'm counsel for the appellant and the Engels family. I have with me my colleague Sarah Etzbaha, that was previously mentioned. Together, we would like to make a presentation to specifically address our request and also address some of the critical issues that were referenced by the city as it relates to the procedural issues as well as the historic issues. In addition to ourselves as counsel for the property owner, we also have the Engels here. The Engels family, both Jason and Alan, are here. We also have our environmental consultant to the extent that you need any particular information from the property owner or the consultant. They're more than happy to provide testimony as well. I'd like to respectfully request approximately 15 minutes for our presentation as a courtesy. Thank you in advance for that. We're here tonight to respectfully request that this commission grant the appeal that has been filed as item 2 and specifically recognize the use on the site that has existed since at least 1973 as a historic legal nonconforming use. I will simply highlight at this point that what we have in our presentation and what my colleague will specifically address is that the city has not met the burden of proof. The city has the obligation to meet the burden of proof and satisfy the 5 elements, not the 1 element that was specifically referenced around continuous or abandonment of the use. So we ask that you grant our appeal. Secondarily, we also ask that you recommend the adoption of our proposed zone change and general plan amendment. That's item 3 on the agenda for the commission. But I also want to highlight another recommendation that we think is important to discuss that's not specifically in the agenda, but certainly within the powers of this commission, which is to consider the adoption of a development agreement that would be considered, because it's not on the agenda, that would be considered at a subsequent time. The reason for that we think is important, because what we're asking for today is, 1, an acknowledgement of the historic use, and 2, a willingness by this commission and the city to continue to work with our client to have an organized and fair transition of the use on the site. As was previously discussed, the property itself is unique in that it is straddling 2 jurisdictions, the County of LA as well as the City of Southgate. And I would reiterate here that in addition to the fact that there is only 1 egress and ingress to the site, also the traffic is directed outside of the City of Southgate. We think that as it relates to the historic use, one thing that we continue to request as it relates to our conversations with the city is that we are more than willing to cooperate with additional necessary measures that will address some of the issues that we know are important to the constituents in the City of Southgate. In particular, we understand that there are a number of studies that are being proposed for investigation by the city as it relates to truck traffic, trucks generally, generally industrial uses and the like. And I'm here tonight to state clearly and emphatically that our client is more than willing to work with the city to not only participate in those studies, but also be able to support the financing of those studies. One of the issues that I want to also highlight as it relates to the industrial uses on the site is that we are subject to strict standards, as was discussed with the other matter, state requirements pursuant to DTSC. The property has been cleaned up. I'm getting kind of, are you guys getting can you hear me okay? I'm getting the mic coming in and out. Okay. The property quickly has been subject to regulatory requirements as it relates to cleanup. The property has been cleaned up. And as we think about the future uses on the site, we really have to balance the fact that already the site has restricted uses. We cannot have the kind of residential uses or educational uses that are currently contemplated in other parts of the city, or ideally would be considered in a reuse opportunity for the site. For that reason, we really need additional time to work with the city to imagine a scenario where we would meet the obligations that are now subject to the property that would restrict a future commercial use. One other thing that's really critical here, that's important and historical background that I think the commission should consider is the fact that within the city's vision for this corridor, yes, we know that the zone was changed from manufacturing to industrial flex. We know that the city's vision for this area was to imagine a form of college district, and certainly that's what the overlay contemplated. But most importantly for our particular use is that in that process from 2009, when the general plan update was contemplated, through its formal adoption in 2015, the use on our site was specifically enumerated and identified as something that would be allowed to exist for purposes of a rightful transition into another use. That's number one. Number two is that the city also contemplated necessary steps to imagine a future reuse of the site. There were two things that the city identified that needed to happen that the city has not done. The first is, of course, working with our regional colleges to imagine the opportunity for them to exist in this area. As we understand it, that has not materialized. The second piece is that the city would adopt another specific plan that would specifically articulate the reuse of not only our site, but of this area. Why is that important? Because there are industrial uses that currently exist on our site and surrounding our site that have to be considered in terms of a long-term transition for this particular corridor. We are here tonight because the city has asked us to transition the use and to provide a sunset date for the current use. Our client, the Angles, are in agreement that the use should be transitioned over time and with support from not only the city, but also the state's DTSC. However, this is not a goal that we can achieve immediately. The code and in the City of Southgate's general plan intends for the legal nonconforming use like ours to be phased out gradually and through the course of the existence of our general plan, which is to sunset in 2035. We are here simply because the city is attempting, outside of its authority under the code, to terminate a use that is legally non-conforming. We are here to request that the commission direct staff to follow the city's current plan, to engage in conversation about the work that needs to be done around the proposed specific plan, and allow us to transition the use over time. The general plan already provides a sunset date for industrial non-conforming uses. It provides that these uses should be transitioned consistent with the termination of the current general plan, as I mentioned. In addition, the community development plan recommends that industrial and manufacturing uses that were specifically identified at the time that the general plan update was adopted, including the uses on our property, that those remain in the area until they be phased out by the introduction of a new college district or the adoption of a specific plan. And I have here for the record to share with you specific language in the general plan that addresses this very issue. It's language that we have identified that should be authority as it relates to the consideration of our request to grant our appeal. And I'd like to submit this to the record and share it with the commissioners. You will see from the materials that I just circulated, this is express language in the city's code that specifically identifies the industrial uses and articulates that they should remain, and I quote, should remain in the area, but can be phased out as the college district expands. The expansion of the college district depends on the adoption of the city's specific plan that would allow for the redevelopment of our property to a proper college district. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague to specifically address the city's required evidence that must be submitted to meet the abandonment of a historic legal nonconforming use.
Thank you, Alfred. Commissioners, Honorable Chairman, my name is Sarah Otzbaha. I'm a land use and environmental associate with Somos Law Group here on behalf of the applicant and the representative of record. As you've heard from our staff presentation, truck, trailer, and container storage has been a primary use on the site since 1973. The Southgate Municipal Code specifically protects legal nonconforming uses so long as they are not abandoned or discontinued for 2 consecutive calendar years. Now, I want to point out, though, that the language, the requirement to find that the use has been abandoned is that the use has been wholly abandoned. That means the entirety of the use, not a portion, not an artificial delineation between what staff has determined is ancillary versus primary. We've submitted now thousands of pages of evidence demonstrating that truck, trailer, and container storage had to be on the site, not only pursuant to the metal recycling operations that were in place for many decades, but also that the city acknowledged that specific use in errantly requesting the applicant to file for a temporary use permit. So from where we are today, that means that to uphold the director's determination would be to take a step back and to reverse many decades of the city's position on where we stand on the legal nonconforming use as it applies to truck, trailer, and container storage on this property. Commissioners, here you have 2 aerial shots of the property as it was operating as a metals recycling facility. One is from 2003, the other is from 2005. The older shots we have are not as crisp as these, that's why we've included more recent ones, but it's representative of the uses as they existed between 1973 and 2019 when the Engels leased their property to Fleet Yards. As you can see, there are containers on the site of varying sizes and shapes, including overseas shipping containers, specifically located around the fence line and in the lower left-hand corner of the site. These are more modern images of the use as it exists today. As you see, the containers are still located on the site. This particular use has not paused for the required 2-year period, as required in the code for the director to find that the use has been abandoned. There has been some discussion of how the operations functioned on the site, and I just wanted to clarify for the commission, for everyone in the audience today. We submitted a declaration by Jason Engel, the family that owns the property and has been on the property since 1973. The reason the truck, trailer, and container storage had to be a portion of this use, not by itself, but a portion of this use, is because the way the operations worked, the metal scrap would be trucked to the site in a container. Those metal scraps were then processed on the site, and as they were processed, they were filled into the containers. The containers stayed on the site, depending on where the end destination was, sometimes a period of weeks, sometimes a period of months, sometimes longer. That's important because the way that it's billed, even the ledgers that we've provided to the city and those thousands of pages of evidence that we've already submitted, they specifically call out a line item in the invoices for truck trailer and container storage. Without this component of the use, the metal recycling operations would not be able to function on the property. This is not unique to this site. This is an industry standard. Back to proof of abandonment. The Southgate Municipal Code has all of these elements that must be demonstrated in order to support a finding that the use has been abandoned. First, the use must be abandoned for a period of 2 years, consecutive 2-year period. You've heard from staff today, and some of you have seen it yourselves in person. The truck trailers and containers are still on the site. They have always been on the site and have been on the site from 1973 till today. Licenses and permits. We've submitted certificates of occupancy dating back to 1977 articulating the use. We've submitted business licenses specifically authorizing outdoor storage. Now, those are after that 2015 zone change. That's important because pursuant to the business license requirements in Southgate, the city has to acknowledge and do what's called a zoning verification prior to issuing that permit. That means previous iterations of city staff have found that truck trailer and container storage use, even after the metals recycling operations have ceased, was legal and non-conforming under the code. Utilities. We've submitted decades of utilities receipts. The utilities are still functioning on the property. Furnishings, equipment, and personal property. You've seen pictures of the site. I have more to share. The truck trailers and containers are still on the site, and I don't think the city disagrees. Finally, owner's intent. We've submitted about 5 letters, all clearly articulating the owner's intent to keep the site operational until such time that the city is ready to redevelop the area. To Alfred's earlier point, that redevelopment is not possible until the city completes the precise or specific plan that is required to do under the general plan. I also want to clarify for the commission that partial uses are in fact protected in the city of Southgate pursuant to the municipal code. The section 1153.030 states that any existing use or part of a building or property will be assumed to be an existing use throughout that building or property, including outdoor activities. That means that trucks that were parked outside should be assumed in the director's analysis to be part of the current use. That means that artificial delineation between truck trailer and container storage as it existed between 2015 and as it exists today is not supported by this element of the code. Finally, according to the rules of statutory interpretation, we're required to read elements of the code as they're stated with the plain language, which means we can't dive deeper than what the language says here. We're also not permitted to read elements of the code so that they invalidate any other portion of the code. Back to the requirement for abandonment, I mentioned that to find that it's been abandoned, the use must be wholly abandoned. If partial elements of the use are protected under this section, under the director's determination, one of these codes is not valid. That is inappropriate according to the rules of statutory interpretation. As Alfred mentioned, the general plan anticipates that the use will continue at least through 2035 or until redevelopment is possible. Now, I know that timeline sounds like a long time, but considering everyone who has to be aligned in order to redevelop that use, that means engaging with the Department of Toxic Substances Control to get their sign-off on any future use, including their sign-off on the city's specific or precise plan that it is required to develop under the general plan. In addition, I would like to point out that the specific interpretation of the code that the director is proposing in the staff report, based on our research, has not ever been used in the city of Southgate before. It implies an arbitrary deviation from standard business practices here in the city. These are some additional images of the containers that are stored on the site. You see overseas shipping containers, some smaller roll-off containers, and the way that they're stacked and consolidated for shipping either domestically or internationally. The director and I disagree about whether or not the use has changed. Their position is that it has changed, but as you see, the truck, trailer, and container use on the property has not meaningfully changed in 50 years. But that said, even if your position is that it has changed a little bit, you have the authority to amend the legal nonconforming use. The code was specifically drafted to be flexible enough to allow that use to continue so that it can evolve with the needs of the city and evolve with the city's capacity to develop that precise plan or specific plan that it is required to do. So long as each of the elements here on the screen is met, the city has the authority to authorize changes to the legal nonconforming use.
Sorry, were those the previous 5 elements that your colleague mentioned?
These are separate elements, Commissioner Ruiz, but those elements are for expansion or changing of the legal nonconforming use. The elements to demonstrate abandonment are 5. Abandoned for 2 or more years. They have to consider whether or not licenses or permits have been submitted. They have to consider whether or not the utilities are active on the site. They have to consider whether or not there are furnishings, equipment, or personal property located on the site, inclusive of the truck, trailer, and containers that you've seen in the photos. And they have to consider the owner's intent. So they're 2 separate bodies. So with that, Commissioner, that brings us back to why we're here this evening. We're here to respectfully request that you grant our appeal. And the reason for that is so that we can move forward either with the development agreement or with the amendments to the zone change and general plan amendment. And the reasons we're asking is so that we can do the transition in a way that is timely, that is equitable, that has a certain sunset date that everyone is comfortable with, and so that we can provide the transparency that I am hearing is being requested both from the city staff and from the community. And the way that would work would be a motion to grant the appeal and a motion to direct staff to proceed with the development agreement. And that said, this is going to be a long process. As you've heard, transitioning a use that's been on the site for 50 years that involves state agencies, that will involve private parties. It's going to involve collaboration with the city as well. And we'd like to reiterate that we are more than willing to continue working with the city to find a solution that works for everyone. And that concludes our presentation. We're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we're going to go ahead and open it up to public comment. So if you have comments on this particular agenda item, if you can please line up to the left-hand side here. Once again, friendly reminder, please keep your commentary to yourself. If you have a voice, feel free to line up and use the mic to make your stance. So if you plan to provide public comment, if you can please line up just so that we can expedite the process. And once again, please state your name, address, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. I'm here tonight to ask you to vote no on the zone change request for 8530 Alameda Street, as they have been operating illegally for years and putting lives at risk with zero accountability. I speak from personal experience.
I'm sorry, can we get your name, please?
Andrew Herrera. Thank you. I speak from personal experience about the importance of road safety and the dangers that come with unregulated truck operations in our city. A few years ago, my life changed when I was hit by a semi-truck. It was a terrifying experience, one that affected both me and my mom deeply. While I had to cope with physical injuries, my mom was left in constant fear and anxiety, worrying about my well-being. That accident ignited my passion for road safety. I don't want anyone else to go through what I did. I believe we need stricter regulations around big trucks and a serious push for better safety measures to prevent accidents like mine from happening to others. At the last city council meeting, a man shared a heartbreaking story of losing his girlfriend to a reckless driver. Now he's raising his child alone. He and his neighbors had been asking for speed bumps long before this tragedy, and yet nothing was done. It's devastating to hear that while residents like him are asking for basic safety measures, the city is misallocating funds that could be used to improve safety, such as better pedestrian crossings, speed bumps, and bike lanes. Instead, it seems like the only people benefiting are wealthy corporations who are able to pay to play and ignoring the safety of the residents. Every time the issue of truck-related dangers is raised, we are ignored. Meanwhile, illegal truck companies continue to operate without any real consequences, endangering the lives of everyone in the community. There are no traffic reports because these businesses aren't even operating legally, yet they continue to be allowed to do whatever they want with no accountability. How is that possible? The city continues to side with these truck companies, saying they are working on it, but it's been 5 years. 2 years ago, the Planning Commission voted to deny Engel's request to rezone his illegal truck yard, and yet he's still operating without permission. So I have to ask, what is the point of these meetings if nothing ever changes? Are they just a formality, a way for the council to pretend that they care and yet taking action when, in reality, nothing's being done to protect us? The residents of Southgate are asking for help, but instead of listening, the city continues to enable these dangerous, illegal operations. I urge you to take a stand and shut down this illegal truck yard at 8530 Alameda Street. Enough is enough. We need action now to keep the community safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Next comment? Please state your name and address.
I'm sorry, before the next speaker, I just want to make sure that the public is aware. The next item is also in regards to this property, but they're two separate items. The item we're talking about right now is for the appeal of the director's determination. The following item is for the zone change general plan amendment.
Thank you. So,
yeah, so comments should be limited just to the appeal at this time.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you prefer that people just go at the very end if it's a combination of things that we're touching on?
If you have items regarding the appeal of the director's determination, certainly give those comments to us now. If you have items that are directed to the zone change and the general plan change, you'll have a second opportunity a little later on tonight to discuss those.
Okay, I'll go ahead now. Hi, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Jennifer Daly with Sell for a Better Tomorrow. I just want to make one correction here, actually two, on Seamless's presentation. They listed the wrong address. It's actually 8530 Alameda, not 8350. And the correction about the property having two exits and entrances, not just one. I can show you on the image where that is. That's incorrect. I'm here on behalf of your residents, a lot of them here, urging you to vote no on the zoning change request for the illegal truck yard operating at 8530 Alameda Street. Your decision today will send a clear message about the integrity of Southgate's regulations and whether you value your residents over corporate profit. As we know, Engel's property has been operating illegally without a permit or license since July 16th, 2021, when the TUP expired. That TUP was issued in error, so the property was actually illegal before that. In April of 2023, the Planning Commission with Meredith Elguita, the previous community development director, voted to prohibit Engel's property from continuing its illegal operations. Meredith was incredibly competent. She considered the health of residents in her decision-making, and she had a meaningful rapport with the community. And the city mysteriously terminated her from her position. She was working to move Southgate towards sustainability and pursued the shutdown of Engel's property. I'm wondering why she was fired exactly. I don't know if that was because she pushed too hard against the unethical business practices here. No one would be surprised if that's the case. For 6 months, I've been asking why Engel's illegal yard is allowed to operate without any citation or enforcement from the city, without paying a dime into city funds. This is all stall tactics that they're doing here, guys. I mean, this has been 5 years where they've had a chance to change these things with the city. They should not be operating at all during this appeal. They should be shut down during this time. They're dragging this out for long enough. They just want the city to do what's best for their profits, not what's best for the people. Giving preferential treatment to Engel tells residents in cities everywhere that Southgate favors illegal business operations and that allocating funds for city improvements is not the priority here. They've been coercing the city to regress. The city determined years ago by the 2015 General Plan Amendment that this area is to be used for industrial flex, IF, as we know, not heavy manufacturing, M3, specifically for use by the College District to benefit residents. Engel's latest plea to rezone contradicts Southgate's vision for a more environmentally sustainable future. Think about the future Southgate deserves. Right now, truck yards are operating unchecked, exempt from environmental protections. This is not right. Harming the community while profiting without giving back. Does this reflect ethical business practices? Does it inspire residents to have trust in officials or pride in their city? It truly doesn't, but you have the chance to change that. Thank you, Commission, for considering what is best for your residents and the future of Southgate, not greedy corporations. It is my hope that the City Council will follow suit and uphold your determination and avoid the possibility of a recall and a deeper look into the stronghold that Engel seems to have over the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We would like to say over the last few years, Southgate has done a good job converting heavy industrial use into community benefits.
I'm sorry, can I get your name, please?
Omar Ruiz. We would like to see the momentum continue and not go backwards. The property located at 8530 Alameda has had more than enough time to pursue another use. They allowed their zoning change without opposition. They did not keep their permits and continue now that they are trying to say that it has been in the same use for over 50 years. Just look at the pictures they sent in their letter. It clearly shows two different operations, one on the left being the scrapyard and one on the right with many trucks. A yard creating much more traffic and wear and tear on the community streets. It is my understanding that one time this site was supposed to be built for student housing, then it became a temporary truck yard in error, and now they want to make it a permanent. I think the Planning Commission sees through this like the residents do. Please make the right decision for the people in our community. Thank you.
Excuse me, did we get a name for the minutes?
Yes.
Did you get a name? I missed
Omar.
it. Sorry. Thank you.
Yes, my name is David Moreno. I live at 8429 Santa Fe Avenue, Walnut Park. I was surprised when I got the letter from Southgate saying that there was going to be a meeting about this, about the factory, the land. Technically, I'm in Walnut Park. We're that string of houses that are on the right side of the map. I didn't know that Southgate controlled that part where the land is, but I'm just down the street from that place. And there's been some cooperation, but sometimes they break the cooperation by one example is we asked them, can you please not move your trucks, whatever storage containers come in after a certain hour because it's already after 10 o'clock and they consistently started doing it again. And it's just, I want to know, this has been going on for years and years and years. This is, from what I'm seeing now, I'm not happy with Engels being there. It would be interesting to see what kind of cooperation we can do to make that area at least more presentable because we have old houses there that are almost 100 years old. And there's a lot of noise and vibrations from the trucks that are like, you could hear the pounding of when they're resting, when they rested on the floor. So and also, since it used to be a recycling plant, there's been a lot of air and pollutions and things like that. And I've also noticed a population of pets are dying because the possibility of poison being used to secure from rodents. So I'm just tired of seeing such an ugly thing in my neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello again. My name is Jennifer Ganata. I'm with Communities for a Better Environment. Our office is at 6325 Pacific Boulevard, Suite 300, Huntington Park. So I actually came across Jack Engels. So I know that some folks in my office will be talking about item number 3, but I just also wanted to share the information that I did have regarding this parcel. So a major campaign of Communities for a Better Environment has been around Central Metal, Inc., which was the adjacent property to Jack Engels. And it was actually LA Department of Regional Planning that had brought to our attention the operations of Jack Engels, because there were a bunch of issues that were happening at the Central Metal site that had moved the Fleet Yard Inc. Tenants to Jack Engels. So I think the reason why I bring this up is that like when we're looking at the different factors for abandonment, I'm also wondering, they have not been using Jack Engels for the purpose of what it was used for previously. And during the pandemic, the prior planning director did reach out to Communities for a Better Environment and spoke to me regarding the site and asking if I had known about the use, and just actually asking about how long has Jack Engels been there and trying to figure out the different pieces. So it was both LA Department Regional Planning from the county as well as Southgate City. And so that was in the, like maybe in the beginning towards the pandemic. So it's been this entire time though. If it hasn't been abandoned, it actually had containers, but it wasn't really operating. And I bring that up because I think it goes to the point of what is the use of this site and whether or not their surrounding sites are being used in the same manner. There hasn't been as much industrial because of the college that, the college campus being there. And the fact that the city of Southgate has been working to figure out how do we transition this area, and that being kind of the plan for the general area. And so I share that information because I feel as though what I heard in the presentation seems to not be a clear example of what has been happening for the last couple of years. While that site has been owned by an industrial owner, it has not been used consistently for the purposes of what has been mentioned by the owner. So thank you. That's all I wanted to share. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello. Hi, my name is Salma Rodriguez. I'm a current 12th grader that goes to Southgate High School. I'll be speaking again later after the third proposal. But I just wanted to make a quick comment. I know there's not a lot of youth here, but I don't think we should wait to 2035 for you to create some positive change in our community. You're not the previous iteration of city staff. It's no longer 1973. The city has the opportunity to create change now. Start a positive change. Protect our environment, our community, and most importantly, protect and invest in your youth. I'm a current student at Southgate High School. I'm a peer college counselor who works directly with Ms. Corona, who is a UCLA reader. I've helped over 300 students apply to not only universities, but community colleges. A lot of our students want to go to ELAC. I wouldn't want to continue to recommend students apply there or in any of the community colleges in this area if there was a truck yard there and it was not operating safely, causing pollution, causing a risk towards our students. Overall, I think that you guys should create this change now. Don't grant the appeal. 10 years down the line is too late. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments? If so, if you can please line up.
Hola, señores concejales, señor mayor, buenas noches. Yo soy residente de Walnut Park y lo que vengo a decirles es que tomen en consideración antes de...
Un momento, por favor. Who would like to translate? Okay. You sure? Okay. If you don't mind.
Bueno.
So, sí, por favor, y apellido y
mi nombre es José
domicilio.
Luis Silva, residente de Walnut Park.
He's a resident of Walnut Park.
Y lo que quiero decirles es que tomen en consideración antes de hacer una decisión
To please
del
consider
impacto
before
que
making
va
a decision
tener todo,
to have everything.
si es que aprueban los permisos para esta compañía.
If it is that
Desde
we
a-
do approve all the permits for this company.
Si desde hace años Jack Engel ya había causado problemas por contaminación allí a los residentes,
So if it's been very many years that Jack Ingles has caused contamination to the residents,
años recientes después agregaron estos troques que están detrás de las casas,
years after they have added these trucks that are behind these houses,
que yo invitara a ustedes a que vieran el impacto que están teniendo a las personas que viven y es enseguida de estos troques,
I would like to
que
invite you all to come and see the impact that these
las
trucks have,
vibraciones, el humo que
the
producen los
vibration, the
trailers
smoke from the trailers.
y todo el impacto que tenemos. Yo quiero que consideren todo eso.
I want you to consider all the impacts.
Cierto que todos los residentes de allí pertenecen a la ciudad de Los Ángeles, comunidad inincorporada Los Ángeles.
Most of the residents
Por eso
belong
creo que
to unincorporated LA and Walnut Park.
muchos de ellos no pudieron venir, pero
That's why many weren't able to come.
sí, toda la área de la Santa Fe está afectada por estos troques que están
All the area around Santa
afectando
Fe is
a
affected.
estos residentes. Y en nombre de ellos yo
In their name, I would like
estoy aquí hablando por
to,
ellos.
to speak for
Entonces,
them.
los agradecería mucho que pues se hiciera algo, que no dieran permisos. Lo que necesitamos son
I
áreas
appreciate something
verdes
to be done
o
to create green
otras
zones,
cosas, centros comerciales, algo
central
que mejore la
commercial
ciudad.
centers
No
or
queremos lugares que contaminen a la ciudad.
We don't
Queremos,
want
me-
areas that contaminate our city.
queremos mejorar la ciudad, no queremos empeorarla.
We want to better it, not make it worse.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias. Next comment.
Buenas noches. Mi nombre es Celina Cepeda. Vivo atrás de la compañía de la que estamos hablando. Mi dirección es 8427.
She lives behind the company.
Se le voy a preguntar si me hace un favor de pausar para que
Ok.
la puedan traducir.
También vengo por lo mismo. No me gustaría que dieran permiso para que siguieran operando.
I'm here for the same reason. I don't want them to be permitted to keep operating.
Aparte de que hacen mucho ruido,
Besides all the noise they make,
esta área donde nosotros vivimos, tuvimos a Centro Mero como unas calles ahí y no quiero de que esta propiedad sea otro Centro Mero.
besides that company, we've already had to deal with Central Metal. And I don't want to continue having issues like we have with Central Metal.
Creo que esta compañía trae mucha polución a nuestra ciudad o a nuestra área.
I believe this company will be bringing
Y-
too much pollution to our area.
Y no quiero, tengo 4 hijos de edades escolares y no quiero de que mis hijos estén respirando todos los químicos que salen de cuando están operando estas compañías.
I have 4 children and and they're school-age children, and I don't want them to be breathing in the chemicals that are coming out of this company. That's it. Thank you.
Next comments.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. My name is Salvador Diaz. I live in the community of Guanampar. My concern is about these companies. There was in our community and contaminated not only anger, also MCI was before, now it's a U-Haul, and it's another company that is calling Sun Metal Incorporated, just across from Engo company is. why we have a lot of contamination in our community is the time to the commissioner don't give or extend those temporarily permit. It's time so they can go. They contaminated. They are creating a lot of people, they die because asthma, disease from many metal fumes, they happen in our community. I recommend it and I take action to stop this contamination in our low-income communities. And not only that, is for the healthy of the all residents around Sela community. These people, they make his own money for many years. It's time so they can move where they're not contaminated. So thank you very much for taking action on this thing and don't give no permits to these contaminated companies. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional any other comments on this?
Hello, council members. My name is Gregorio Jimenez. I live on 10423 Madison Avenue. I've been a resident in Southgate for 25 years. I went to East Los Angeles Community College. I just wanted to thank you guys for all the positive stuff, changes you guys have been doing throughout the city, changing the zoning laws from manufacturing. Personally, I see the changes on, Alameda and Firestone. Back then, that used to be a recycling plant. Now, you guys turned it into like a storage. I'm not sure if that pertains to Southgate or if it's East Los or if it's South Central. But I think that positive change has definitely impacted or brought up property values. It's now a storage. There's a Jack in the Box. There's a Starbucks. So, I mean, I personally went to East Los Angeles Community College. I see that the city has a lot of growing potential. When I was going to school, there was a lot of foreign students that would come visit and that would come study in our campus and they would stay in nearby Airbnbs or whatever. So I think if we were to, change that from, manufacturing or whatever it is, what's it called? A truck and trailer storage facility to like maybe student housing, I think that would be a great opportunity to attract more students into our community. Not only that, I do find a little disrespectful the fact that, we have people saying that it has always been a storage container facility, but the pictures clearly show, they had a few containers where they were transporting the recycled materials. But I don't think that's, that small trucks that they use to transport necessarily meant that it's, a storage facility. It's clearly a night and day difference between a recycling plant to now what it is, a truck and trailer operation. So I want to, I hope that you guys can appeal this so that we can, attract or change the vision of the city and attract, more students into our community. Not only that, to reduce our pollution and just make Southgate a better place to live in. And I think if you do it for the right purposes, the money will eventually come in terms of like housing and development, rather than to just leave it for corporations that are not really going to contribute too much to our community in terms of keeping it safe and bringing in money. But yeah, that's just kind of my comments. I'm a little nervous. I never stand in front of a council members, but thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm Javier Gutierrez. Just speaking on behalf of the concerned residents for own health and safety concerns. I do want to ensure that the appeal doesn't get approved, right? I think this has been going on for way too long. I think that the Angles have enriched themselves at, our own cost, right? At what cost is it? Our health, right?
low life expectancy. I mean, the list goes on, right? A low quality of life. I don't think we deserve that, right? I think that Southgate is evolving to be, a healthier, smarter community. I mean, the science and the studies go on and on and on how, a company like this that's still operating in the city of Southgate, affect us in a negative way, right? So I just want to reiterate and I want to ensure that the appeal doesn't get approved. I think that a business like the Engels business has no business in Southgate, period. Thank you so much.
Thank you. No additional comments here? Going once, going twice. Okay, now we'll move it on to comments that were submitted via email.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can summarize the correspondence staff have received on this item since the staff report was published. We've received 5 pieces of correspondence. We've received correspondence from Jennifer Daly representing Sella for a Better Tomorrow, generally opposing the trailer storage use and conveying to you many of the points she conveyed orally tonight. We received correspondence from Mr. Mario Dominguez urging the Planning Commission to uphold the director decision and denying the appeal. Also correspondence from Claudia Rivera generally supporting denial of the appeal. And finally, correspondence from Mr. Nathan Cueto generally urging the Planning Commission to deny the appeal. And I'm sorry, one more. The email you received from the applicant's representative, Sarah Atzbaha, and her summary of support points for granting the appeal, many of which she also presented to you this evening. That's the extent of our correspondence received, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, do you have any questions for staff or the appellant?
And Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes.
might, just point of order, and you've got, we have a staff guest, if you will, with us tonight. I just wanted to explain, just briefly, as you've heard, these issues are very heavy with legal issues, and so we have advising the commission on procedures and his normal role. Mr. Hardwick's with you this evening. But we also have in council Mr. James Eckert that's with us as an extension of staff and kind of our content expert on this particular case. And he's here to help the commission with deliberations and any questions, a legal expert augmentation to staff at your disposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Colleagues, do you have any questions for staff, for guests, or for the appellant?
I actually have a disclosure to make. I did write it out as a memo just so that to save time, but the essence is that I do want to be transparent. I did visit the project site yesterday. During the site visit, I was in the presence of Jorge Morales, the former council member, and their consultant, Donald Thomas, a former employee, Alan Engel, the owner, and Sarah Atzbaha, their legal counsel. And so I did kind of write down some of the observations I made, which you were all able to see through the pictures. Of note is the single entrance into the property, which during discussions at the site, they expressed their concern about that single entrance limiting their the use of the property. One thing I did notice while I was there was a gate that connected or led onto the former Central Metal facility. And as Jen Ganada mentioned, and they did also, the property owner did mention that at one time, Fleet Yards was storing trucks at that property. And so another thing that I think is important to note is that I did observe the site pretty full of trailer trucks and containers. I did ask whether or not there was any truck maintenance done on site because that would entail the use of hazardous materials. I personally didn't see any, and they said there wasn't. And Another thing that I want to make note of is Mr. Engel talking about the importance of the property to his family and the interest in keeping it within his family as part of their legacy. He did also talk about the importance of being environmentally conscious during his operation of the industrial activities with Jack Engel, the Jack Engel Company, and the subsequent remediation activities, which he noted were part of a voluntary cleanup effort. They did emphasize their hope to transition the site towards a current zoning requirement while keeping the trucking activities as a possible source of income to further remediate the site to be able to redevelop outside of the current land use covenant has set limits to. And before the meeting, I do want to be clear that I did make it clear that nothing I said, no expressions were to be taken as any direction of how I am going to vote tonight. I do, as is required, we are required to make our decisions during these meetings and to not come with any predetermined notions of the vote. We do want to be open to as much information as possible, which is why I did go to the site. And in hopes of getting as much information, because I think it is important for us to have as much information before making these important decisions. One thing I did want to ask staff about the continuous use issue, which is, what is pretty much the basis of the appellant's argument. Those 5 issues, if I were to read it, I would assume that these 5 notes, whether or not they've been on site for more than 2 years, whether they've been, submitting permits for license, whether they have personal property, owner's intent. To me, that would signify that the same occupant has been on site, right? Or am I reading that wrong? Or am I understanding that wrong?
Well, I know that staff has done extensive review of the property. We looked at the permits. We looked at what was issued in the past. We know that the previous user for recycling ended on or around March 2020, and that the new user or new tenant started operating that at the same time, Fleet Yards. And so we know that it's a different use. One of the things that we did, because back then in 2020, we saw that it was a different use. We issued a temporary use permit just to try to deal with the owner, the new user in there. And the reason why we didn't issue a conditional use permit or other type of permit is because we had determined that the recycling facility had stopped. This is supposed to be a temporary user. But that temporary use permit wasn't continued and eventually expired.
Yeah, that's kind of where I don't have clarity whether that temporary use permit should have been issued to begin with or not.
Well, right. And I mean, we issued the temporary use permit because we didn't see that the use was a legal non-conforming use. And we needed some way to, I guess, deal with the issue at that time. When you actually look at our code in the Southgate Municipal Code, it only gives you a limited time to have a temporary use permit. It's 3 days consecutive or 10 days calendar year. And so it's really limited. It shouldn't have been approved that way with a temporary use permit, but I believe staff at the time had tried to work, with the owner.
To have some sort of use at the property.
Right.
I think do you want to add to that response?
Yes, if I can. Thank you. So I just want to be clear about what the director's determination did, and then again, what the specific role of the planning commission is today. Under law, and you commissioners, you're all well aware of this, but we're talking about right now a legal nonconforming use. The issue with the legal nonconforming use is exactly what it is in the title. That is, it had to have been initiated, commenced, developed, and continuously ran in a legal fashion. But what happens is the law changes, in this case, a zoning law change, which then makes it now non-conforming to existing law. It's staff's position and the director's determination that the original use that was legal non-conforming, that was recognized by the city, that is still recognized by the city, was a metal processing / recycling use. Staff doesn't deny the fact that as part of that use, there were trucks and trailers on site. And as council indicated earlier, those were used to bring material onto site, to temporarily store them on the site, and then they were removed from the location as the processed metal was distributed to wherever it was going. I believe sometimes locally, nationally, and potentially internationally. That was the use of any trucks or shipping containers on that site, was as an integral component of the recycling business. The recycling business, the metal processing, is what was deemed legal nonconforming. That use terminated in or around March of 2020. In going over the factors that you were talking about and that council had raised, it's important to note a couple of things. One is that pursuant to both the city's code as well as case law interpreted by the courts, the burden of demonstrating legal nonconformity is actually on the person who is claiming the legal nonconformity. So it's not staff's requirement to disprove something as legal nonconforming. It's the applicant's, or in this case, the appellant's burden to actually prove the legal nonconformity. Now, with respect to the recycling and metal processing use, there's no dispute. Both staff and the appellant are in agreement that that was a legal nonconforming use. Appellant has raised a couple of issues with respect to indicating why the director's determination was incorrect. In part, they relied on the factors that Commissioner, you were just referencing, or at least you referenced one component of. Another component that they talked about was specifically and primarily dealing with the continuous operation for the 2 years, or discontinuance of operation for 2 years. Again, staff's position and the director's determination was the metal processing and the recycling business has been terminated, and it has been for over 2 years. So the primary issue that staff is claiming is the legal nonconforming use of this property for metal processing and recycling terminated in or around March of 2020. And that is demonstrated both by comments and information that has been provided by the appellants, the property owners, and the business operator, as well as by staff's own review of the public records. Part and parcel of that was the demolition of the building that was actually utilized on the site for the metal processing work. So in going through the factors of the 2 years, again, it's not staff's position that the truck and trailer storage that is currently going on at the site has been discontinued. We understand that that is a different operator, and normally if the metal processing and recycling use had merely been transferred from one tenant to another tenant, that would not terminate a legal nonconforming right. Okay? It's the discontinuance of the metal processing and the recycling that is no longer occurring, and I don't believe that that is in dispute. I don't believe the appellants are claiming that they're still doing metal processing and recycling at the site. So the first issue that the director found was that that process, that use of the site has terminated. It has been for over 2 years. That's really uncontested, that use has been terminated. And it's for that reason that that legal nonconforming right has also terminated, because of that discontinuance for 2 years. Now, what council brings up and is accurate on is there are some factors that staff and the director need to take into consideration when making a determination about whether or not the right has been abandoned. What's misleading a little bit in the presentation were exactly what those factors are. And I draw the commission's attention to the code section, Southgate Municipal Code section 11.55.040, subsection D, which deals with the abandonment of an industrial use. And that's where it lays out some of the factors that council was raising with respect to the determination that the director made. The first one is the apparent intent of the owner to discontinue use of the non-conforming structure is apparent, as determined by the director. And it's important that we see that, because the abandonment, if you read the first line of subsection D, talks about both a non-conforming use or structure. But the owner's intent only applies to the use of a non-conforming structure. I think it's pretty clear that he intended no longer to use that structure for metal processing and recycling, because it's been demolished and it is gone. So that to me is clear intent as to he had no intention to continue to use the structure. But again, That one section is about the intent with respect to the structure, not with the intent to continue the use of the property. That being said, with the termination of that building, the demolition of that building, and the uncontroverted termination of recycling and metal processing activities at the site, the owner's intent seems to be clear that it was no longer the intent to use the property for that purpose, rather to be used for right now, truck and trailer storage is an independent use of the recycling and metal processing. There are other factors that are laid out in subsection 2, where it says that where furnishings, equipment, and other personal property associated with the use, and remember we're talking about the legal nonconforming use, are absent, and the use has been discontinued for 2 calendar years, evidence of a discontinuation of a nonconforming use shall include, but not be limited to, absence of an active business license. There is no longer an active business license for the metal recycling. What was at the time originally JECO, JECO was the acronym for the name of the company, and then subsequently was AEP, which was Alameda Angle Properties, that was operating at that site. And there is no more active business license for that business. The absence of utilities. Well, obviously, there's still a use going on at the site. So the fact that there are still utilities to that site doesn't take away the fact of the discontinuation. That would be evidence of a discontinuation, but the code doesn't require that staff find that all of these things have been met. Staff is not, there's nothing in the code that says if utilities are present, well, therefore the legal nonconforming use is still ongoing. It's not. It's just been converted. Those utilities are being converted to a different use. Now, what the appellant is alleging is that the truck and container storage has been a continuous use the entire time, or at least continuous since prior to the zone changes that impacted the metal processing and recycling use at the site. And the director's determination, based on evidence that was provided by the appellant and through our own public records research, is that the use at the site currently is a different use than what was there before. That it was the use that was there before, as even stated by council today, is that the trucks and trailers were there as part of a recycling business. That recycling business is gone. And although council referred to the ability for an existing use, what she was referring to, I believe, was Southgate Municipal Code section 11.55.030 subsection O. And if I'm incorrect, please correct me, but I believe that's the section where it's talking about, for the purposes of this chapter, an existing use of any part of a building or property will be assumed to be an existing use throughout the building or property, including outdoor activities. And so I believe what she's alleging is that because there was a component of the property that was used for truck and trailer storage, that we should presume that that was, in essence, under the code, existing on the entirety of the property. The problem is that this is talking about the existing legal nonconforming use of a property is deemed to be an existing legal nonconforming use of the entirety of the property, not just one component of the property. The problem is staff's determination is that the trucking use that is going on right now as a truck yard, as a storage facility, is not what was previously approved by the city, is not what was legally established at the property, and so therefore cannot have a legal nonconforming right. So this code section here that would allow for a legal nonconforming use that happens or occurs on one portion of a property to be deemed to be happening on the entirety of the property does not apply to the truck trailer storage. That would apply to the metal processing and recycling, but that's gone. So this does not have any bearing on the truck and trailer storage because it's a completely different use. The use of it now is it's as a truck yard where that has no connection to metal processing or recycling whatsoever. Before, the truck trailer component was an integral component, and that's in the applicant's own words. It was an integral component of the recycling business. It was there to bring metal onto the property, to store it while it was being processed, to temporarily store it after it was processed, and then ultimately to ship it off to whatever the end destination was. So the director and staff considered all of the things that needed to be considered. It just merely disagrees with the applicant's interpretation of the factors. But staff considered them. The planning commission can consider them. At the end of the day, it's all uncontroverted with the exception of the aspect that the applicant is alleging that the truck trailer container storage has been ongoing the entire time and has a legal nonconforming status. Staff is saying it never did. And therefore, the criteria for terminating a legal nonconforming right does not apply to the truck and trailer storage. It's staff's position that that doesn't apply here because it was never legal to begin with. And the fact that there were no business licenses dating back at the beginning for a different use, a truck trailer storage use, separate and apart from the metal recycling, is an indicia that they weren't deemed to be separate uses. It was one integral component of the entirety. The fact that staff required a TUP to be obtained, whether it was rightfully or wrongfully issued, is a separate question. But the fact that they even required it is a demonstration that staff has believed the entire time this was never a legal nonconforming right. Because if it was legal nonconforming, no TUP would have been required. But instead what happened was the recycling and metal processing uses had terminated. The truck trailer storage as an independent use, completely separate and apart from recycling and metal processing, commenced. And while they were looking for an alternative to develop the property, a TUP was provided. But again, had it been legal nonconforming, TUP never would have been required. And it's important to kind of understand those distinctions, that what is being brought before the Planning Commission today is really a twofold thing. The part about the zoning and the general plan amendment is the next item. It's not for consideration at this moment. It is, A, does the Planning Commission uphold the determination by the director that the legal nonconforming use of the property for metal processing and recycling has terminated and is therefore no longer a legal nonconforming right? And two, does the Planning Commission uphold the director's determination that the current use of the site for truck trailer storage, independent of the metal recycling or metal processing and recycling, not have a legal nonconforming right? That's all it was. We're not terminating that right. We're saying it was never legal to begin with. And then I want to raise just two additional things. One is there was a statement that the Planning Commission has some leeway with respect to certain aspects of this. And I believe what, again, was being referred to was language in the code under 11. And again, if I'm incorrect on this, please correct me on that.
Well, I'm trying to get a word edgewise, because what you are raising are elements of a case that have not been raised in the staff record.
You're not allowed to talk right now after Mr. Eckert is finished. If the commission has questions for you, you can answer those questions. There's not an automatic rebuttal right here.
Oh, I thought
So
Mr. Eckert was referring to me while I'm standing here.
But if you could just please let Mr. Eckert finish his points, then we'll turn it back to the commission.
When council raised the slide that included 5 additional items, which didn't relate to the termination of a legal nonconforming right or the abandonment of it, it referred to the expansion of a legal nonconforming right. And what you saw was the slide that talked about a 10% increase, right? It was the slide that had 5 additional things, and that the Planning Commission has some discretion there. It's not the Planning Commission. What the code actually says, and this again is under 11.55.030 subsection J, is it says alterations or expansions of a nonconforming industrial structure or use are permitted subject to the approval of the director through an administrative permit application, and then subject to the following standards, which includes the expansion of up to 10%, it's incidental in character, so on and so forth. There has been no application that has been approved by the director to allow for any of these things. But again, that's not the basis of staff's determination. The basis of staff's determination is the discontinuance of the metal processing and recycling for a period of over 2 years. And number 2 is that the other aspect, the new use that's going on at the site, never had a legal nonconforming right. So again, all of the standards that apply to terminating a legal nonconforming right Staff's position is it does not apply to the trucking component of it because that never had a legal right. And then just the last comment that I'd like to make is just the statement that the discontinuation of this legal nonconforming right to conduct metal processing and recycling is in contradiction to the general plan is absolutely incorrect. The fact that the general plan talks about allowing legal nonconforming uses to continue for a gradual transition to something under the code, that's if the operator actually continues to use it. But in this case, it's not staff that ordered the discontinuation of the use. The applicant, the operator of that metal processing recycling business on his own terminated the use of the site for that business. It's not staff who's doing it. Staff is merely saying, hey, look, you made a choice. You terminated this use. It's been done for over 2 years. We're just saying your right is now terminated by operation of law because you did that. But it's not staff that's going in and say, hey, terminate it right now. Not with respect to the metal processing recycling. We're saying you can't recommence it because you already stopped it for over 2 years. They would have had the right for a gradual transition had they continued continuously operating that business. But they didn't, it stopped. So it's not staff that is terminating. It's not staff that's going in contradiction to the general plan. To argue that would be the same as if I operated a business with a legal nonconforming right and I came into the city and said, look, I'd like to stop my business. And the planning commission would say, no, hold on. You can't stop your business. You need to gradually transition to something else. And I go, no, I want to stop it. I want to go cold turkey. I don't want to run this business. But you have to because our general plan requires a gradual transition. It doesn't. It allows for a gradual transition for businesses, for the legal nonconforming businesses that continuously operate in that fashion. Here, we didn't have that.
Thank you. Any other questions by my colleagues here?
I just wanted to, again, thank the community for being here. I think it is important for everybody to be able to speak on this issue, including the owner and especially the people who live around the site and have given us more information on what it is like to be living next to the site. I've lived in Southeast LA my whole life. I lived a few blocks from this site for 14 years. And so I'm very familiar with the contamination, the pollution problems in the area. And full disclosure, I've been a member of Communities for a Better Environment since I was a teenager. So I know what it's like to live in an environmental justice community. And I also know what it's like to have family and neighbors who work at some of the facilities. But having known those people as well, I know the importance of having these facilities be safe for everybody, for the workers and for the community around them. I think we need to understand that, our as somebody mentioned before, the residents who participated in developing the general plan kept that in mind, knowing the change in the community, knowing that there needs to be, as one of the community members mentioned, a buffer zone, green zones between these industrial facilities and the community. And Mr. Engel himself noted, the importance of his family to have a legacy. And so I think keeping that in mind, I personally am leaning towards upholding the director's decision because I don't see the continued use. I don't see how trucking has been part of the use. I'm still interested in hearing what my colleagues have to say, but I do want to say that I don't agree with speakers who have said that the continuance or the issuance of the TUP has been related to corruption in the city. I personally know some of the council members. I know, some of them are teachers, are coaches, are neighbors. And I personally take offense to those allegations. I've heard a lot of those allegations in the past and they've been unfounded. And I want to encourage people who make those allegations and have proof to do something with them. I take offense because I grew up in this area where there have been, local municipalities with corruption, and it has been embarrassing for me.
And so I do plead to the community members to really take that serious. If there is real corruption, there are steps to report it to the district attorney. I don't think it's something that should just be thrown out there. I would be the first one who would want to know if there is something like that, especially with this case. I don't see that. I feel like the city tried to work with the appellant to, make the transition a little easier. Whether it was wrong or right is not the question, like Mr. Ecker said. We are where we are now, and we need to, I personally think, to keep pushing for the transition of the property for a better use. And I would like to encourage the applicant to really work with the community to make that something that the community wants and that the community will invest however they can to its future use. But I'll hand my time over to my colleagues.
Thank you. Commissioner.
I would like to reiterate some of the things that my colleague mentioned. I also had the opportunity to visit the site, I believe on Wednesday, and just for educational purposes and just to see firsthand what was being brought today. So I did have an opportunity to meet with Mr. Engel and with Jorge Morales, where I did visit the site and heard about the historic use. Also, I noticed that traffic was directed out of Southgate. I know someone mentioned that the trucks were going down Firestone. I saw the trucks going down Alameda. I didn't see anything on Firestone. And I did notice the one way in, one way out. And there was also, Mr. Engel did speak about the transition of use. Just for educational purposes, I wanted to see if you can answer this question for me, John. Can you clarify the difference between industrial flex and the heavy manufacturing?
I'm sorry, between
Industrial flex?
industrial flex. Industrial flex is, it's more of a lighter use. There are certain uses, I guess, in industrial that's permitted, but it also allows for uses that are not permitted in the manufacturing. It also allows for actually housing in there, and this is going to be under the next item for the zone change. But there are a number of uses in the industrial flex that are permitted that aren't allowed in the heavy manufacturing zone, including housing. I think some of the other uses were like parks and open space and community gathering areas. So there is a difference.
And what about the other one, the manufacturing?
The heavy manufacturing?
Yeah.
There's a list of, there's a table in our code that has a list of uses there that are permitted. Heavy manufacturing allows for, as mentioned, the recycling facilities, the metal manufacturing, other types of industrial and manufacturing uses are allowed in manufacturing. Some of them are permitted by right. Some of them require a conditional use permit that require planning commission approval.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe a few questions here, just for clarity. The metal recycling structure that was referenced on the property, do we have a date when that was demolished? And if it was, did that go through the proper city channels in regards to like permitting?
So it's our understanding that there were no permits issued for demolition of the structure, but the demolition occurred around the March 2020 period.
And my other question is, if the director's decision is upheld in regards to the temporary use permit, how does the city enforce city regulations for entities that are not in compliance?
The temporary use permit's already expired.
But okay.
So we're not considering that. They're considering the legal
The
nonconformity.
two issues are the termination of the legal nonconforming use and whether or not the truck storage use is permitted or not permitted.
So what would happen if we upheld the decision of the previous director? What would happen to that property?
Well, one of two things would happen. I presume that if you upheld it, the applicant would appeal to the city council. If the applicant did not appeal to the city council, or if it did so and the city council upheld the director's decision, then, code enforcement would take steps to end what would be not a legal use of that property.
Thank you. I just kind of, my colleagues just kind of echo what, really appreciate that the community's come out. I think time and time again, we ask that the community get involved and, make their voices be heard. So I just really want to make sure I acknowledge all of you that were here. And, it's a great presentation by all parties. I know you have a few
I have
comments.
not had a chance to.
Yeah,
to
I know you have a few comments to make based off of some of the comments that were made by our guest here. But I think ultimately, I think there is a process, and I really want to make sure I applaud the city staff for taking the necessary measures to, provide transparency around this subject. So on that note, I'll defer to the city council or the city attorney here in regards to how we proceed in regards to allowing our appellant to.
It's up to you. There's no automatic rebuttal right, but if you have questions for the appellant or want to hear what else he has to say, you're certainly free to allow him to answer those questions or comment on what's been said.
If we give him the opportunity, can we put a time restriction on that?
I would think that since we have a lot of people in the audience and another item to continue, I would say, 3 minutes is the typical audience time limit. I would hope that the council could complete his comments in that time.
Okay, thank you. So I'll open it back to council. If you can stay within 3 minutes, I'd be greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson Alfred Freiholt, for the record. I want to start off by saying that I want to take issue from an administrative standpoint on the quite voluminous and verbose commentary and legal arguments that were raised by council that were not part of the administrative record as it relates to the matter before you. And the fact that I'm provided 3 minutes to rebut extemporaneously all the issues that were raised by the city attorney in regards to what I think is not relevant to the deliberation that you have before you. I want to state that for the record, first of all. Second of all, what we've maintained as part of our presentation and our request is that we are very interested in working with the city. You asked a very compelling point as a commission, which is what is going to happen to this property? And we have maintained consistently in our conversations with the city, in fact, conversations where they specifically acknowledge the fact that we should work together on a future use of the property. Our client is really committed to that. And so from our standpoint, what we need is additional time. We've already indicated for the record that DTSC has significant restrictions on the property. We would love to build housing here. The reality is that we can't do that. We would love to build school uses here, but the reality is we can't do that. And for us, what we have here is a request to work with the city on a process for retiring the use. And I want to say that as it relates to the work that was done and the fact that the city attorney is cherry picking issues related to the facts, what we want to talk about is not only the evidence that we've presented that the container storage and truck storage is an ongoing use from the very beginning prior to the adoption of the general plan that makes the use legal non-conforming. The city, let me be clear, the city took affirmative steps to acknowledge the existence of that use. The fact that they issued a TUP, we know that was erroneous, but that has to do with the leasing arrangements. There's nothing in the code that says that if you have a different lease, that automatically results in a different use or a termination of that use, number one. Number two is the city, after the adoption of the general plan, issued licenses, business licenses that required a confirmation by the city that the truck storage and the container storage was a permitted use. The city did that. The city attorney has not indicated that to you, and that's an important information for you to consider. The city took affirmative steps to indicate that that use was allowed. The city had to make that determination. So you can't pick and choose what you'd like to do based on the political winds or the public comments or concerns. We definitely empathize with that. But the code is what it is. The city can take affirmative steps to modify the legal non-conforming code and provisions. The reality is that it has not done that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I would again remind the audience, you know, the commissioners are the ones that determine when they can stop taking, so please don't shout time. You know, we all are aware of the timer.
Thank you very much. Wishes of commissioners? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to grant the appeal.
I'll second.
Okay. Can you clarify what you mean by grant the appeal?
Oh, the director's appeal.
Are you motioning to uphold the director's decision or to overturn the director's decision?
To uphold?
Uphold.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Prieto,
Yes.
Commissioner Ruiz,
Yes.
Chairperson Osaeta,
Yes.
motion passes. Item number 3, request for zone change and general plan amendment for a property located at 8530 Alameda Street and determining the action is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. 1, conduct a public hearing pursuant to Southgate Municipal Code Section 11.50.040.b. 2, accept the determination that this matter is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. 3, adopt the findings as outlined in resolution number 2025-5, attachment A. 4, recommend to the City Council no change to the zoning district of the subject property from IF to M3 and no change to the community design element and other elements of the general plan regarding removing the subject property from the Southgate College District.
Staff?
Thank you, Chair Ozeta. This is the same property as the last item, 8530 Alameda Street. The reason why we had 2 different items is because the previous item dealt with the legal nonconforming issue, the director's determination. This item is for zone change and general plan amendment requests by the applicant. The applicant is Sarah Atzbaha, Somos La Group. Owner is Alameda Engels Property, Jason Engel. And again, the request is to change the zone from industrial flex, IF, to heavy manufacturing, M3. There's also a general plan amendment, GPA, to allow truck, trailer, and container storage facilities within the Southgate College District to continue operating. Or the second one was to remove the subject property from the Southgate College District. And with that second one there, removing the subject from property from the Southgate College District, what that entails is amendments to that general plan. So in order to remove the property from the Southgate College District, you would have to amend figure CD-4, the figure that shows districts in the community design element. And you'd also have to amend figures and tables in the housing element, including figure HE4, which shows districts, HE6, which shows zoning map, HE52, which shows a table for outside specific plan areas, and amending table HE55, showing the summary of sites inventory. Again, the site is located at that 6.78 acre site there on Alameda Street. Close up of the site, 8530. Again, the owner owns both properties there in the blue and also to the north in the LA County area. This is the figure shown in both figure CD4 of the community design element and figure HE4, the district housing element. And the area that we're focusing on is shown there in the red circle or oval. Currently, this is the existing, and it's showing that area there where it shows sub-area 1, sub-area 2 of the Southgate College District. Such a property is right there in that location. So what they're proposing is to remove that from that Southgate College District. Again, this is your existing, and would be your proposed, where the subject property located in that area would be not located in the Southgate College District. So this will be a change to the figure CD4 of the community housing district, and also figure HE4 of the housing element. And then similarly, for the zoning map, this shows your existing, where the property is zoned IF, Industrial Flex. It's zoned similarly to the properties adjacent within the city. The applicant is proposing to change that to M3, Heavy Manufacturing, shown in the black. Some of the issues of concern with the zone change and general plan amendment are that certain uses are allowed in the IF zone, including residential uses. Changing the zone to M3 would preclude potential new housing development. It would be contrary to the housing element and statewide housing needs. It would remove 509 potential housing units from the site. The city would have to make a no net loss finding under the no net loss law, which requires new suitable housing in a different location. And there's also the loss of potential uses such as recreation, education, public assembly, parks, plazas, and open space. Furthermore, if the zone change was approved, then the use on the site as for truck parking, truck storage would be subject to conditional use permit, which would have to be approved by the Planning Commission, and the city would also have to identify additional housing sites under the no net loss law. For the environmental analysis, the Planning Commission would make a recommendation to the City Council that's not subject to CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act. It is not an approval. It does not commit the city to any definite course of action, and the CEQA does not apply to projects which the public agency rejects or disapproves. Our recommendation is that the Planning Commission conduct the public hearing pursuant to the Southgate Municipal Code, accept the determination that the matter is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, adopt the findings as outlined in resolution number 2025-05 included in the agenda bill, and recommend to the City Council no change to the zoning district of the subject property from IF to M3, and no change to the community design element and other elements of the general plan regarding removing the subject property from the Southgate College District. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Do we proceed to public comment or what?
I would ask if the applicant has a presentation, do they have a separate presentation?
I don't have Alfred Freihoff for the record, representing the applicant under item 3. Honorable Chairperson and Commissioners, we simply want to state briefly, not under 3 minutes, hopefully just a few more minutes to articulate our request. We do not have an additional presentation, but John, if you could bring up our original presentation, I'd like to just highlight a couple points to support the requested action. I also want to reference for the record correspondence that we have submitted for consideration by the commissioners dated October 18th of last year related to our request for the zone change. I will add that the zone change request is not something that we necessarily thought of independently. It is a product of conversations we had with the city about trying to achieve a common goal. There were a couple of issues that were raised specific to our requested action. Number one is we do have a series of conflicts. The reality is that we have a city that is a visionary that wants to retire historic manufacturing and industrial uses. That's the fact. Another fact is that there are plenty of businesses like the Engels that continue to operate successfully in accordance to either grandfathered uses. We're not the only one. I'm very concerned about the precedent that's being made tonight as it relates to that. Another issue is that the city specifically acknowledged the need to gradually transition these uses. A third thing that I wanted to mention specifically as it relates to our address as it relates to our property is that we have a number of significant constraints that limit the reuse of our property. The first is the ownership of the property subject to two jurisdictions. The County of Los Angeles continues to allow the manufacturing uses. Even if we were to maintain the current zoning designation, which is industrial flex, it is an island unto itself, because there's other historic industrial uses that would continue independent of the actions that are taken today. The other piece that we wanted to mention is the fact that the property is already restricted by DTSC and is physically constrained in terms of access, in terms of proximity to other commercial uses. We have already attempted to evaluate the future uses on the property, and the reality is that we would have to work with DTSC to allow for that transition. And what we find, factoring all of those issues, is that the best course of action is to work with the city, standardize the historic use with the requested action. How do we balance that? First off, we want to identify specifically that the proposed zone change request would make consistency as it relates to the surrounding uses. We are surrounded by manufacturing uses. That's a fact. Second is, as we proposed it, and we have language to recommend to this commission as it relates to the zone change that I would like to share with you all. What we're proposing to do is to allow for a specific amendment to the general plan that identifies an allowable use that's based on the historic use. What does that mean? That means that what we are proposing is that we would narrow the allowable manufacturing uses to exactly what exists today for the duration of the general plan through 2035. That's all we're asking for. And we agree with staff that as it relates to the proposed zoning, it is true. We would require a conditional use permit. Why is that important to us? Number one is, as currently contemplated, there is no mechanism for the city to work with the applicant to regulate the use on the property as it relates to the number of trucks, as it relates to the proximity of parking and storage to the perimeter of the property, as it relates to the hours of operation, as was indicated by one of the speakers from the community. The articulated proposal would trigger a conditional use permit that would create the avenue, the structure for us to work with the city to adopt a series of mitigation measures that we think would be appropriate, reasonable, and respectful to the surrounding uses. We think that's important. In fact, as the record demonstrates, our client, the property owner, has already proposed to the city manager and to the director of community development a set of mitigations that would allow for a softening of the perimeter of the site with landscaping, with greenery, and other proposed measures that would allow, again, for the coexistence of this historic use and the transition of the use. Another thing that I'll mention that's really critical that was already spoken by John, which is this issue concerning housing. We are in agreement. Housing is really important. It's important for Southgate and it's important for the region. However, as I stated repeatedly, housing is not allowed on the site already because of the covenants recorded as required by DTSC. So even if the existing zoning was to remain, which is industrial flex, housing would not be permitted on the site based on the restrictions by DTSC. And so we're not losing a site that would be appropriate for housing. What we're doing is allowing for that successful transition of use that we think is required, and we certainly embrace it, and will give us an avenue for working with the city to adopt the necessary mitigation measures that we think are appropriate. That would give the staff the authority to issue that conditional use permit, subject to review by public hearing and public comment, and give us a chance to work with the community to hopefully bring this property to some future use that everybody can embrace. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we have any public, open it up to public comment. If you do have comments, if you can please line up to the left-hand side here so we can expedite the process here. Once again, friendly reminder, no clapping, no cheering. Just want to make sure we're respectful of everybody's voice and stance. Please, if you can state your name and address. Thank you.
Okay. It's green. Hi. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Janet Preciado Vargas, and I'm one of the Southeast LA youth organizers at Communities for a Better Environment. I am proud to support Youth Action Club at Southgate High School as part of our youth programming. This group of students want environmental justice in the communities of Southeast LA and here in the city. They demand clean air, clean water, and clean soil in the place they call home and go to school. Although some folks who wanted to be here today couldn't make it, Southgate High School students came together to write public comment letters opposing the site's proposed zoning change from industrial flex to heavy manufacturing, as it would put our community's health and safety at risk. We have those letters with us today. This group of students want their health and safety prioritized and not more changes to their neighborhoods that could prevent them from living full, happy, and healthy lives in this city. It is important to consider that there are homes and schools right across the street from this site. Our families' lives and health are non-negotiables, and changing the zoning to allow intensive industrial activities so close to where people live and learn is dangerous to the well-being of the people you were appointed to serve. This decision should not be made without having extensive review to ensure that already impacted communities do not further have their health risk heightened by the activities that can happen at the site. Residents deserve to understand the surely significant environmental impacts of this proposed change. Any proposal to enact such a harmful and drastic zoning change requires CEQA review, whether or not this is considered a recommendation or not. A current DTSC investigation into a nearby site suggests that this site may be a source of contamination, including metals and harmful chemicals known as volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. These pollutants can damage the lungs and nervous system, putting people's health at risk. DTSC also suspects that families living east of the site on Santa Fe may be exposed to vapor intrusion, meaning toxic chemicals from underground could be seeping into their homes. These chemicals are suspected to be coming from the Jack Engel site. A DTSC 2020 Engel Parcel 5-year review report for this site concluded that VOC treatment was completed, yet there is speculation that the site is a source of VOC contamination. We need an environmental impact review to determine why the remedy failed and to understand potential impacts on current and future residents, students, and workers. Rezoning this parcel from industrial flex to heavy manufacturing without an environmental review can cause more harm to the adjacent residential homes and the future students and staff of East LA College, given the site and regional history of heavy industrial uses. We urge the Planning Commission to deny the zoning change, given the lack of data of soil and soil vapor delineation, lack of community engagement for the adjacent residential homes who are at risk of vapor intrusion, and the incompatible land use of heavy manufacturing next to the future East LA College. Please listen to your residents and youth voices who care very deeply about their loved ones and the future generations here at Southgate. Thank you. And here are the letters.
Thank you. Next comment, please.
Good evening, members of the Southgate Planning Commission. My name is Jennifer Campbell, and I'm here today not just as a concerned citizen of Los Angeles, but as someone who dedicates my life to working with kids in early childhood development, specifically with those who fall upon the autism spectrum. Over the years, I've researched the harmful effects of environmental pollutants like VOCs and vapor intrusion, and their impact on the development of young children. The research and data is undeniable. The pollution in Southgate is having devastating effects on your most vulnerable, your children. I've worked across income brackets and with communities of color, and have seen firsthand how lower income cities are disproportionately impacted by pollution. These communities often bear the brunt of environmental degradation, and Southgate is no exception. The heavy industrialization of this area, especially in close proximity to residential neighborhoods, is making people sick. You are confronted with the critical decision, whether to approve Engel's request to rezone his illegal truck yard from an industrial flex to a heavy manufacturing. I urge you to vote no on this request, just as the Planning Commission did in May 2023. At that time, there was substantial evidence to justify Engel's to justify denying Ingles' permit, and 2 years later, the same reasons to vote no still remain. Here are the facts. Ingles Truck Yard has been operating without a legal permit or license since before 2021. That means Ingles' business has been contributing nothing to Southgate's tax base, yet it continues to damage the health of the community. This isn't just a matter of illegal zoning, it's a matter of public health. Recent testing by the EPA on 83 homes surrounding Ingles' property has uncovered shocking levels of arsenic and lead. These toxic substances are known as carcinogens and can pose a serious threat to pregnant women, the elderly, and especially young children. Even at low levels, lead poisoning can cause significant behavioral and cognitive problems in children, leading to aggression, hyperactivity, and antisocial behaviors. The levels found in these homes should be alarming to anyone who cares about the well-being of residents. Yet Ingles' business continues to profit without any regard for the environmental or health consequences. Southgate is clearly a hub for industry and supports Long Beach Port, but just because you're an industrial hub doesn't mean you should allow wealthy corporations to run rampant without the regard of people around them. Your residents deserve protection to ensure their health and safety are prioritized over the unchecked profits of corporations like Ingle. It makes no sense that this business has been allowed to continue operations with no permit or license for years. I ask you, as the leaders of this city, to stand with the people who have made Southgate their home. Vote no on Ingles' request. Choose the health of the community over corporate greed. Your children's future depends on it.
Thank you. Next comment.
Hello again. My name is Rosemary. I'm one of the Southeast LA youth organizers with Communities for a Better Environment. I also grew up in Southgate about maybe 6 different times. I've moved within the city of Southgate, so kind of all around the area. I'm also an alum from Southgate High School and was also a part of the group of the letters you're receiving. That's actually how I got involved at 14 years old, and now work at CBE at 28 years old. And what I wanted to share was, as actually the main and the lead organizer for our U-Haul campaign, I focus heavily on incompatible land uses and have a lot of conversations with the department, DTSC, Department of Regional Planning, Public Works, there's a whole list, right? And some of the points I wanted to bring up, I think are the things that we've been hearing countless times. A lot of our membership showed up today. I think one of the things that they have shared to myself is that they're really tired of having to tell their stories over and over again and having to explain why they don't deserve to be exposed to potential contamination. And a lot of the times we're kind of hit back with, well, you know, there's restricted uses that are grandfathered in. And I think that limits things to, you know, corporations who profit from this. A lot of the times we're hearing from our representatives, it's out of our jurisdiction, and we often have like government hot potato is what we call it in our meetings. Another thing, right, is legally obligated to investigate. That also gets really tricky, right, when there's constant rezoning, boundaries, a lot of things that shift. Most recently, and I think what someone just mentioned in their previous comment, we worked with both the state and federal Environmental Protection Agency around the lead contamination surrounding the parcels neighboring Jack Ingles. And through that work, we were able to find out that there's potential exposures to VOCs. And what we found out is only that one residency is currently having testing. Part of what we were told by DTSC was, well, they don't open the door, so they must not care. And we want to emphasize, right, oftentimes that kind of comes with like, we don't trust government. And we're really here to try to patch that up and try to see how can we improve that and let them know that representatives are meant to help uplift community needs and concerns. Another thing I wanted to uplift, right, constantly hearing codes protect land uses, but when will they protect the people on the land? We organize for our health, we don't compromise our health. And regardless of how this is voted, we're not going to easily let this go. We're honestly really tired of fluff words. I think it's easy to say things like, this is equitable, this is for the community, when in reality, the people who live here know what's up. And the last thing I'll say is, well, I understand there's the Ingle legacy. That's also a legacy of contamination, and I'm more concerned with the future of our residents and community members. Thank you.
Thank you. next.
Hi, can y'all hear me? Okay. Hi, y'all. My name is Ozzy. I'm actually a resident of Florence Firestone. I actually grew up there my entire life. I work with Communities for a Better Environment. I am a youth organizing intern, and I'm here to speak out against the proposed zoning change from industrial flex to heavy manufacturing. I think it puts our community's health at risk. I think it puts our community's safety at risk. I think the proposition does not actually prioritize what our community needs. I think it's a little, honestly, it's a little absurd to try to, I think it's a little absurd to try to rezone that area from industrial flex, which could be used for multiple things, like you mentioned, potentially housing. I know they previously said that DTSC wouldn't allow for housing to be built there, but that I'm sure that's not the end all be all. I'm sure that working with DTSC is possible to further clean up the site so that we could actually use it for something that's productive for the community. We've done it in plenty of other places in the community, and I think that it's important to rezone this parcel, or not to rezone this parcel, rather. I think it's important that we acknowledge the fact that there's homes right across the street from the site, and that changing the zoning to allow for intensive industrial activities so close to where people live is dangerous to health and well-being. It's actually within 100 feet of like Walnut Park, as people mentioned. We've had several issues with pollution in the area. We're no strangers to pollution, and I think it's about time that we actually start doing something about it. Like Janeth mentioned, there is a current DTSC investigation that suggests that this site of Jack Engel is actually, that may be a source of contamination for volatile organic compounds. These leach into the soil, they go into people's homes, they affect their mental health, they affect their physical health. And I think it's just a bad idea to change the zoning from a place, sorry, I think it's a bad idea for this area to be further polluted with industrial uses. I think it's not, sorry, I'm just speaking over in circles a little bit, but let me look into my talking points. There would be more pollution in an already very polluted community, and Southgate is already dealing with too much industrial pollution. I think it's about time that people of this commission, people of the council, do something about this and start prioritizing people's lives. I think that we need to do something about this, and we shouldn't give in to corporate greed. I think it's pretty simple. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening again. Jennifer Ganato of Communities for a Better Environment. I just wanted to uplift what my colleagues have already shared. I also think a rezoning to heavy manufacturing would actually be a backslide as to what the city has been moving towards. I will say, and the parcels that are part of LA County, they're also part of what's called the LA County Green Zones Ordinance. And CBE actually had worked with other EJ organizations to pass it in unincorporated county. But the idea behind Green Zones Ordinance was to take inconsistent land uses, particularly in disadvantaged communities, and create a better buffer zone. So theoretically, you could have a property that was polluting, but at some point, there would be basically a phasing out, and within at least 500 feet, you couldn't operate a polluting facility. So the other parcel that's north of where the Jack Engel site is technically supposed to be under the Green Zones Ordinance. And also, when you look at the Jack Engel site, I think Ozzy had just mentioned, on that other side is within 100 feet are actual residences. So even if we were to use the buffer zones that CBE is constantly advocated for, which is like about 1,000 feet, it's way below that 1,000 feet buffer. So having heavy manufacturing alongside communities would essentially, I guess it would frustrate the purpose of trying to create green zones and ensuring that disadvantaged communities had environmental justice. So I urge you all not to do the rezoning and to leave it as it is right now. I do think that there are other uses that you can use that land for that are not heavy manufacturing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Javier Gutierrez once again. The goal of switching to M3 is not aligned with what the constituents have expressed for years. I think for council to say that the Angles are empathetic with the community, but still want to operate and even switch the zoning to M3, where now heavy metals enterprise, it's kind of taking steps back, no? So for you to be very empathetic with the community and then for you to, you know, kind of sit here and listen to what the constituents have said, and now you want to rezone and take steps back to an M3 is very telling, no? I'm just tired of seeing corporations and wealthy families like the Angles who contaminate our community with lead and VOCs. It's just financially benefiting the Angles. It's honestly giving a legacy of greed, a legacy of contamination, like another constituent mentioned before and operating illegally since 2021. I think it's time we hold this family accountable for their inactions, neglect, and greed. Placing a burden on the community's health to this day, but again, to rezone to M3 in order to operate heavy metals is very telling and transparent of this family. The Angles have demonstrated that they have no empathy and they don't have a common goal with our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, Jennifer Daly. Just probably going to reiterate a few things that people are saying. Thanks for hearing everybody out. I know it's repetitive, but it's really important stuff and it's important to the people here. So thank you, Commission. There's a reason why some historic and legacy practices are retired, and it's because we learn about them and what they're doing to the community, and it's causing cancer. The pollutants here that are proven to be here time and time again, you're hearing that. Yeah, when we learn about the contamination and toxic pollutants that are making the community sick, it's our responsibility to change the practices. So why the city would go back to M3 heavy manufacturing, knowing that it's hurting the people living right next to it, it would just be a real problem. It doesn't look good for the city to do that. It opens the door for more businesses to push for heavy manufacturing also. If they get to do it, why wouldn't other people get to do it? And that's contradictory to the city's plan for sustainability and the general plan. They keep claiming they're willing to work with the city. That's what we've heard tonight from Engels and Sonos. But they've had 5 years and they've been repeatedly misleading about the use of the property. As Jennifer from CBE said, Engels isn't using the property in the way that they claim. It was in fact abandoned for 2 years before it renting it out. The buildings for this, for its recycling use were torn down and they ceased being a scrapyard for well over 2 years. Despite the TUP being issued in error and a full 5 years passing, Engels has still been operating without permits, no license, no taxes paid to the city, and now they want the city to change the zoning to M3 heavy manufacturing. They keep asking for more time. M3, it's like they come here with no plan of how they're actually going to clean up what's going on their property and a future plan. They brought nothing to you to acknowledge what they've actually caused. The pollution that they caused has not been acknowledged at all. They haven't worked with the community to deal with that. And I think that's really problematic. They had the chance to do so and they didn't. So thank you.
Thank you. Next comment.
Jason Engel. We actually did provide a lot to work with the community. The city has received what I call a milestone agreement, which is a lot of communication milestone points to try to find the right use. I do care about the community and I am an environmentalist. I went to a school for public and environmental affairs. I do care. I really do care. Legacy property for me, I'm not trying to damage anything. We were already on a property that had issues. Okay. So we did voluntary cleanup of it. I want something good for the community. This all came from doing something good for the community. We just had the same use on there so we can figure out what to do. Our DTSC restrictions are difficult. Our ingress egress is difficult. There's a lot of difficult points to the property that we need research time. We need time. We're not trying to add M3 to do something bad to the community. We're trying to do it, which was mentioned, that has milestones in it to be able to work with the city and find out what the city wants. I would love more than anything to put housing on the land, but we can't. So I just want everybody to know, like, for the record, I do care. I'm not trying to hurt anybody. That's never an objective. The objective is to do what's good for the city, what's good for the community. But on that being said, to be balanced, we have to have some agreement that we've, again, already provided. The other lady, I understand that she's saying we haven't provided an agenda or anything like that, but we've actually done that. It should be in your guys' stuff, and we provided things, and everything was a lot of communication and a lot of discussion and a lot of requirement for communication. I'm happy to do that. That's all we were trying to do. Adding M3, again, like Alfred said, it still has milestones in it. It still has points to transition the property. It's not like, hey, we're asking for something more so we can leave it like that. It's something so that we can do something valuable. It's not to ask for more and do damage. It's to utilize that milestone agreement, that agreement of points. There is an agenda to it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Tim Simpson. I'm an environmental consultant, Vice President of GSI Environmental. I've been working on this site for a couple of decades. And there has been considerable remediation done at this site under the purview, first with the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and then it transferred over to Department of Toxics. There's been a significant amount of soil removal, excavation, also operation of a soil vapor extraction system to deal with the volatile organic compounds that have been mentioned many times tonight. In addition, we have a request from Department of Toxics to do a 5-year review of the remedy for both the north parcel and the south parcel. The south parcel is what's in your city. And I am working with the Ingalls to do that. I intend to prepare the work plan that Department of Toxics has required and to do the 5-year review to confirm that the site is safe and it's not causing adverse impacts to anybody. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, David Moreno again, 8429 Santa Fe Avenue. Whatever happens, like from a few years from now, I hope that things will get better, whether it be a college area or industrial area. I'm 45 and I've had this most of my life because of the air quality in the area. It's an inhaler. So whatever happens, like my time's probably going to be up in 20 or 30 years. This is how long it's going to take to fix this? At least for the kids in the future, do something.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Donald Thomas, and I'm sitting there and listening to everybody talk about the Ingalls, and I'm wondering which Ingalls are they talking about? Not the people that I know. I started working for the Ingalls in 1982, and I worked there all my life, sent all my kids through school. Look at me, I'm still healthy. Does it look like I'm sick? I got here from Jamaica, and one of the first jobs I got was there, and I have a opportunity to go for the highway patrol, all different ones. I turned it down because these people, I say, if I go somewhere else, I don't know what I'm going to find. And I started off driving those big rigs, and then next thing you know, I got a promotion, and I'm so taken back tonight with the stuff that I'm hearing people talk about. These people, you talk about them, you ought to know somebody before you run them down like that. And they are they're people with a lot of character, really. If not, I wouldn't even be even sticking around with them. Who you see go out and retire from a job and still try to keep in touch with the owners and stuff, because just the way they treat me and my family, and I see all the other workers out there, and I'm quite sure that some of the guys would be surprised to know what's going on, because I wasn't privy to this kind of stuff. But when I come here tonight and I'm hearing this, I'm appalled, really. And I hope you take into consideration for these people what they have, because they made my life that I could retire, and I'm doing okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comments? If so, please line up so that we can continue to move forward.
So I'm Selena. I live behind this property. Just one comment. I don't want this. I don't want this heavy manufacturing behind my house. That's it.
Thank you. So now we'll move on to any public comments submitted via email.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Staff received 4 pieces of correspondence since the publication of the staff report. I'll summarize those for you, and hard copies have been delivered to the commission, and we'll make those part of the formal record. We received correspondence from Mr. Dominguez, Mario Dominguez, strongly urging the Planning Commission to deny the proposed general plan amendment and zone change. We received correspondence from Claudia Rivera, also supporting a denial of the proposed actions. We also, again, are recommending making part of the record the submittal we received from the applicant's representative, Sarah Atzbaha. Her support points are in her correspondence for granting the the general plan amendment and zone change. And then finally, a piece of correspondence from Melody Cuevas, again, generally urging the commission to deny the proposed general plan amendment and zone changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Prieto, do you have any questions for staff or the applicant? Okay, so Commissioner?
My question is, it's more like a comment, really. I didn't really hear or understand from the applicant how this was exempt from CEQA. It's my understanding that because and I'm assuming, I'm taking the stance from the decision we made prior to this item, that we don't believe there has been a continued use from the previous use. And as such, reverting back to M3 would signify a use that would create an environmental impact to the surrounding community. Am I right, staff? And as such, we would need to do an environmental impact report and follow CEQA.
Our recommendation is that you make a recommendation to City Council not approving the zone change and general plan amendment. So that being, the recommendation by itself is not an action, I guess, per CEQA.
I understand that, but if we were to approve the zone change, it would trigger the need for an environmental impact report and CEQA.
If I may, so that analysis would have been done pursuant to the analysis that was done for the general plan amendment in 2015, because it would have been part of the baseline of existing operations in 2015.
So we're in the question portion. So if we direct a question to your group, you can go ahead and step up. But right now the questions are directed based off of the commissioner's direction.
And to really simplify, if your action tonight would be to not recommend a zone change or a general plan amendment, that action would not require any CEQA undertaking. if you were to recommend that the general plan be amended and that the zone be changed back to M3 before the city council could approve that zone change, a CEQA examination would need to be conducted because the change of zoning would be a project under CEQA that would require compliance with CEQA.
And that's my understanding. And I do agree with some of the community's concerns. Full disclosure, I do have friends that live behind the facility. My niece previously lived behind the facility, right on Santa Fe, right across the former train tracks. And so I have heard her experience. I wouldn't have asked her to come because she does have school tomorrow. And she does live, she is living at my mom's house. So it's not nearby, but I do remember seeing her with nosebleeds. I do remember hearing her complain about the noise, as some of the residents have, one of the residents mentioned tonight, or a couple of them actually. And so and the dust, and it can be debated where the dust came from, where the iron dust came from that did cause her nosebleeds. And so it is a concern. I do believe these concerns to be valid and truthful. I have seen them, and it's a hard living. I too experienced that growing up in Huntington Park in front of a cement recycler. I know the feeling of helplessness that goes with living in a community like that. And so it's real, smelling and suffering from respiratory ailments. I have family and friends who go through that, and because of that, and I do believe that if we do the zone change, it would be a step back, and it can open the door for, to extend the change. I don't think it would alleviate or make the transition easier. So I am leaning towards not approving the zone change. I would like to hear what my colleagues have to say.
Do you have any questions for staff or the applicant at the moment?
Not anymore.
Commissioner?
Yes, I have a question, John. Just kind of wanted to touch on the zone change. What would be what happens in a denying the zone change?
If it is denied, you make a recommendation for denial, city council doesn't do the zone change, then nothing happens. It really just dies.
Okay, thank you.
You're gonna add?
Do you have questions?
No, go ahead, you can. go
I
ahead.
can propose. I'll make the proposal to deny the zone change.
Let me add some commentary before. Valid points across the board, and thank you for the great presentation for council that are here, the applicants, and thank you staff for the thorough report. I'm not going to extend or continue the conversation. I respect the questions that my colleagues posed. So thank you for your thoughtful and insightful questions. But I'm ready to move forward. So feel free.
Yeah, so I'll proceed with that, and then just to really reiterate a comment that Ozzy made, and that I'm pretty familiar with too, regarding the current limitations and the 5-year review. I think that that's definitely something that can be changed. I don't think, that's beyond our purview, but I think there's nothing prohibiting the property from further cleanup and getting approval for other development uses.
So can you make a motion?
And so I move to deny the zone change.
I'll second.
And that includes the general plan also, correct?
Yeah.
Commissioner Prieto?
Yes.
Commissioner Ruiz,
Yes.
Chairperson Osaeta,
Yes.
motion passes.
Moving right along to any audience comments at the time? No?
This will be comments on any item that's not on the
Yeah.
agenda.
Anything not on the agenda? And, okay, no comments? Yes?
Thank you. Excuse me. Yes, Mr. Chairman, we did receive one piece of correspondence for general audience comments from Mr. Mario Dominguez conveying his disappointment in the city council's decision on the SO5 conditional use permit appeal, as well as his disappointment in the council's decision not to pursue a phone-in option for council and public meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Any city staff comments?
No comments, sir.
No? Planning commission comments?
I would like to inquire about the possibility, and maybe this is something that I can look up to and follow up with you on out of this commission meeting regarding oversight and inclusion of vapor mitigation measures. Speaking to the fire department folks, it sounds like LA City does have some requirements, and I believe theirs is inclusive of methane because there are sites within the city that are close to former oil wells, which, you know, having been familiar with the Jack Angle site, it appears that there has been some around this area as well. But I think if there is a possibility to expand any sort of building requirement, I don't know if this is the proper avenue to discuss that, but
I'm sure we can help have a staff discussion offline, get more information on that for you.
that would be great. Thank you.
No, I just wanted to thank city staff, members of our community to come out today and voice your opinions. Thank you for being here this late.
Yeah, I want to make sure I echo that. Thank you, everyone, for coming out and saying for the duration of the meeting. Something did come up, and it's been brought up a couple of times, and maybe city staff can provide direction or maybe report back at the next planning commission, specifically around a property on Rio. They referenced a specific fence or illegal fence. So I was wondering if the city can report back on if that entity has a business license or any on-site development permits for the next meeting.
I didn't get the location, but you guys know the one that's in
Is it?
question.
I don't know the actual address. I know it's brought up.
One that has been in discussion is the Mr. C's towing site on Rayo. It might be that
That,
one.
I think that is that the fence?
Yeah.
Or- yeah, like metal
Metal
fence,
fence, yeah.
15, 20. So
We could bring
Bring an update.
update on that
Absolutely.
next meeting. Sure.
other than that, thank you very much. We'll adjourn the meeting at 10:14. Thank you, staff, for your commitment to our city. Thank you.